want to be tossed. Come find me, I want to be lost. I wanna be lost. I wanna be lost. I wanna be lost. I wanna be lost. Yeah. Don't slow down, my past will catch me. Keep on moving and dreaming, but don't flee. Pray for happiness in the routine. Been running since 19, always absentee. I choose to feel comfort for free. So get lost. I just wanna get lost. I just wanna get lost. I just wanna get lost. Yeah. I'm leaving, but I'll never say goodbye. My home's a home till the day that I die. I'll never stop running to stay is to cry. And maybe one day I'll bring you along for the ride. Until then, get lost. I just wanna get lost. I just wanna get lost. I just wanna get lost. Yeah, just get lost. Yeah, get lost. Yeah, get lost. Oh, baby, yeah, get lost. Yeah. Run. Get me. Oh! Take me out! Wanna get lost! I just wanna get lost! I just wanna get lost! I just wanna get lost! Yeah! Just get lost! I wanna get lost! Baby, yeah, get lost! Alright, just get lost! Yeah! Just get lost! Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? Need some help from you now. Yeah, come on, Scooby-Doo, I see you. Pretending you got a sliver. You're not fooling me, 'cause I can see the way you shake and shiver. You know we got a mystery, this also Scooby-Doo. You ready for your act? Don't hold back. And Scooby-Doo, come through, you're gonna have yourself a Scooby snack. That's a fact, yeah. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, here are you. You're ready and you're willing. We can count on you, Scooby-Doo. I know we'll catch that villain.
What's up, folks? I'm going to play this intro real quick.
Evening, everybody.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we did some things that were wrong. We did a whole lot of things that were right.
We've taken control of the oil in the Middle East, the oil that we're talking about.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create.
We choose truth over facts.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. The foothills of the Himalayas.
Television is what people are saying.
We are fighting Satan himself.
Journalists, ask them the questions! Ask them! Ask them! Ask them!
It
agreed that everybody, once they inside, they should. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry. America's dead.
America is indeed dead, folks, and that is the intro.
Evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great show for you tonight.
Yeah. Back to week hiatus. It's been a
little bit of catch up, but there's been some good stuff in the news.
Yeah, I mean, well, everyone's been breaking out for the most part about this new. I can't even say the word, so I'm not. So apparently, the theory based behind the man Coup is not necessarily allowed on this platform. That is YouTube.
So we actually can't even.
We're going to call it Q theory instead. I just want to preface that.
Q theory. So like the Q theory shaman.
Yeah, which is really what I was expecting. I mean, like, so this past weekend was really when all this started, and everyone's saying, "No, do not see this movie." So I'm like, okay, now I have to see it. So I went to the AMC in Times Square yesterday to go see it, and it's so less QAnon than I thought it would be. The way that they're framing it it left me so underwhelmed that the fact that they could have took this in so many different areas. But let me.
It's like they made it appropriate for Hollywood, and even Hollywood lost their shit about it.
No, there was articles coming out left and right about this movie. There are, and I'll read the article in a bit, but let me get this up here.
It just seems to me that
I'm not sure if you saw this, but CNN definitely does not want to watch this movie.
And you seem pretty familiar with him because he doesn't really hide his association with this real wild plot that involves, drinking the blood of children and things like that.
No, he doesn't.
Which true. Is not at all even close to what the movie actually is.
No, not about, but there's plenty of stuff showing, like, I mean, there's plenty of evidence with like the whole adrenochrome thing where like she's just lying out of hand anyway. So, but we don't have to go there.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to say, I'll say it in a little bit.
Doesn't hide it at all. And you have a lot of people who are in this world of QAnon who say, oh, they don't know what that is. They've never heard of it. They're just asking questions. With somebody like Jim Caviezel, he is openly embracing it. He's openly using its catchphrases and its concepts. He's speaking at QAnon conventions. And this film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon, but claim they don't know what it is.
And The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of
These
sex
people
trafficking. But that theme, it's that kernel feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory. Tell us how those two things work together.
And the most durable and the most believable conspiracy theories are not entirely false. There's something in them that is true, and the rest of but the believers point to the one true thing, and they say, "Oh,
okay." So, fucking these
in terms of child trafficking, we know trafficking is.
Yeah, so we know that
it's so bad faith.
But it's not that. It's. I'm trying to. Let me try to put this into perspective. Remember David Schroeder's Hollywood climate change movie Up?
Yeah.
Remember when they did Up? And this is where I want to tie it in. What if they did this kind of smearing about that movie? About how many people would be outraged if they did this kind of smearing to David Sirota, to Hollywood elite Democrat husband, lover, David Sirota's hot film Up.
And I think that'll tie into what I'm going to talk about later anyway. But there's too much money to be made in the climate change grift that they're going to keep elevating that narrative. But there's too many dirty hands involved with the whole child trafficking, so that's kind of why they're actively suppressing it. It's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and so Dr. Rivera here, so he's saying that the manager at my place only showing it once per day and at night. I was getting, I was hearing stories that there was actually like theaters that were, I was hearing one story about like, apparently this one theater in, I forget which state, but the theater air conditioning was broken, but only specifically for the theater that was playing this movie. And so there was people who went to go see it anyway, and there was like 5 other people there, and it turns out the air conditioning was just fine. So like they're like sort of like, and there was also like apparently like there's stories of like people saying that there's like whenever they try to watch this in theaters, there's like some sort of like huge disturbance or like some sort of distracting thing like
it wouldn't surprise me
during the movie. Like, and that I'm not going to go there. Like it's it's pretty like wild to make cross that line. But either way, what do you guys do to make an entire podcast about the rise of
real? We know it has.
It's so. I mean, it's so obvious. It's a fabricated fucking psyop. Like the thing is that stuff like Pizzagate was real. Like Comet Ping Pong is real. Like
that's the thing about a lot of these things is like
these guys are trying to say that it's like, oh well, there's a nugget of truth, which is like their version of like kind of malinformation, like pretending that something that is factual is not real. And it's like, nope, that shit's real. You're just trying to frame it in a way to make it sound like it's crazy. Like, yes, there's some crazy QAnon stuff out there, but like, there's a lot. Yeah, like the hot dogs, like Nick Riveria said, like the hot dogs and the pizza that got delivered to the like the White House, the like $45,000 bill or whatever. Like, yeah, like the whole Pizzagate stuff is real. So like the idea that these people are like, oh well, there's like a nugget of truth that could just be like and they're misframing it and turning it into a conspiracy. It's basically these people are standing for fucking child predators.
But that's the whole thing about QAnon. The whole psyop of QAnon is that it's like close enough to the truth that it bastardizes the whole concept. And then it makes everything look ridiculous. And like QAnon came out around the same time that the Jeffrey Epstein killed, quote unquote, killed himself.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, you're probably right about that.
And so, like, I really see Q theory as like this way of sort of shadowing and hiding the real truth behind the child trafficking rings that are
100%.
actually occurring in the United States, how much it's actually occurred in the United States and how much it's been going on since.
I'd 100% agree with that.
Let's finish this.
Real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're creating bogus statistics. They're created out of fear.
Shouldn't we have a moral panic about child trafficking? Is that wrong?
No, what's also funny is he's actually kind of making a reference to the satanic panic of the 80s. He's actually gaslighting about another actual like real conspiracy that like these people are satanic and like they fucking.
That's what it is. It's all extrapolation. None of it is actually real.
He's gaslighting about something that's like I think he probably drinks his own Kool-Aid, but like he's using talking points to cover up something that's actually like a thing. Like just look up at Maria Abramovich. Freaking Lady Gaga, freaking spirit cooking, like all that stuff is fucking real.
It's when you get close enough to the truth is when they really have to shun you as like some sort of like right-wing nut.
It's true. And what's even
like I kind of like why like why this topic itself has become so radioactive to the point where you can't even talk about child trafficking anymore. You can't talk about it. The whole thing, the whole concept of children being trafficked in the United States, which is a real thing, and it happens, and he admits that it happens. That's just a wild conspiracy theory. Why are you spreading a message about that?
Like,
what is that about?
And why is it? Why, like, who? I just don't know how these people sleep at night and being like, you know what? Today I'm going to shit on bringing exposure to child trafficking.
Child trafficking victims. Yeah.
Freedom,
today,
it's specific. Is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites, and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down. So there's a very participatory element. You're not just going to see a movie, you're just killing 2 hours on a hot day. You are helping bring down these pedophile rings and save children. Now, it's not true, but it's a very comforting and it's a very warm feeling to have.
Wow.
It's a warm feeling.
What a piece of shit.
Human trafficking.
Go through that guy's hard drive.
You could tell why they're mad, because a lot of the Hollywood favorites that were supposed to come out this year ended up getting bunked by this independent film that came out of nowhere and is, quote unquote, right wing. But the movie centers around a real-life story of a founder of an anti-sex trafficking charity, Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard. It's seen as a surprise in that his relatively small-scale movie outperformed what is seen as a summer blockbuster, Indiana Jones on the 4th of July, which sucked, by the way. And
shocker.
Don't even bother watching Indiana Jones. I don't know what it's horrible. It's terrible.
That does not surprise me at all.
A date that in the past has been dominated by the likes of Jaws, Forrest Gump, Top Gun, and the feat of The Sound of Freedom beating Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny is even more impressive when you consider the numbers. So the first movie, not to be written by George Lucas or directed by Steven Spielberg, fifth Indiana Jones, had a budget of $295 million. Compared to Sound of Freedom, which was directed by Alejandro Monteverde, cost $14.5 million.
Damn, shoestring budget in comparison.
By today's standards, that is a pittance.
That's like enough to do like a freaking promo
to your regular summer blockbusters. Yeah, exactly. So while the fifth Indiana Jones movie made $11,698,000, The Sound of Freedom made almost entirely its entire budget back, $14,242,000. Animated movies like Elemental and Spider-Man were behind these films, taking in only over $2 million each. So this is kind of like a David and Goliath situation.
Well, did you look at the Rotten Tomatoes? The Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 99% like regular person score and like a 70 or 60% like reviewer score. And there's like 5,000.
It's not a terrible movie, and so a lot of this is based off of the real life FBI, or rather Department of Homeland Security ventures of Tim Ballard. And I'm not gonna say that a lot of this isn't probably exaggerated to some extent for movies. Pretty sure that they say that. To paint this as this like broad brush of like this like blood drinking like vampire like elite,
exactly.
Like I have to tell you, in this movie they don't even they don't even cross the US government at all. And in fact, like what like articles like this did, this Rolling Stone article, sorry, fucking ad block.
Yeah, like it was like one of the just absolutely salacious headlines. Yeah, superhero movie.
Sound of Freedom, a super movie for dads with brainworms.
So bad faith.
Starring Jim Caviezel, and he has this guy that made the star actor had some like pretty whack beliefs in the past. And it's not like the exactly Kimbo. It's like a turbo Streisand effect. Nobody wants to see the shitty Hollywoodies that are coming out nowadays. But whenever you cause like hysteria, this happened. This is the same thing that happened with we live in. It's because of stakeholder capitalism. We live in this world where hysteria and attention. It's attentionomics. Hysteria and attention translates into money. So whatever press you can get, if it's mass press, even if it's bad press,
they don't care.
It's in terms of representative numbers. That being said, me watching this movie came into it expecting like some kind of like crazy, like wacky movie where he has to like fight the U.S. government and like save children and all of that. None of that happened. In fact, it opened up. I'm not gonna say it was a bad movie. I didn't think it was terrible. I for one didn't enjoy probably the last like hour of it simply because I felt like they could have brought it in a much harder direction. You know what? I think Sound of Freedom didn't go far enough. I think this movie isn't enough like QAnon. I think QAnon is actually closer to the truth than this movie.
Well, and that speaks to another thing because like you know about like Anne Heche's like untimely death where she got into the car accident and then you see like the drone, the helicopter, and you can see her kind of like getting out of the stretcher and then next thing you know she's dead. Do you remember that story, Anne Heche? Well, she was coming out with like another movie about child trafficking and she met an untimely demise. So I'm kind of the belief where like there's a limit to how close to the sun Hollywood will let you fly, and they'll still like smear you either way.
Yeah, but I really believe this movie was pretty tame. It was fairly comfortable with the way that it's government, and I'm trying my best not to say spoilers. But the farthest that he goes in defiance of like the quote unquote like government is that Homeland Security calls him up and he's like, hey, you're going to go try to save this girl in Colombia. You're a Homeland Security agent. You can't do that. You only deal with domestic stuff. That's the furthest they went. There was no blood drinking. There was no Hollywood elites. No government elites. Nothing. And that's what I wanted out of the movie. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I guess my kind of you're good. I guess my kind of take on that is that like this is something I try and like tell like blue pill people is that like fucking reality is way more fucked up than like a Hollywood movie that's like based around real events, because the real events are way more fucked up. You know, like if Cavazio starred in a movie that was about freaking Comet Ping Pong and Pizzagate, nobody would see it because it would just be like, that's too ridiculous. There's no way.
You ever see Eyes Wide Shut?
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's real.
No, that's real, but that's not.
Oftentimes, like they'll disguise things and they'll treat it as fiction and pretend that it's not reality.
It's more like an allegory.
Like the more extreme parts of what reality is. Yeah, they'll like disguise it as fiction.
I get what you're saying there.
That's what it seems like.
But yeah, it seems like they have to be really careful about like what rabbit holes they can even bring people who are like a little bit receptive to kind of being skeptical of what they're told. They can't just like give them the freaking, adrenochrome treatment. They have to freaking kind of let him in nice and easy. Oh, this was an FBI agent who like just wanted to do his own thing and like the government wasn't doing enough. And, they can't just go for the jugular with the really crazy stuff. And I don't think, like I said, I think there's like a limit to what you're allowed to say. Even
I mean, this was written by the same guy who wrote Passion of the Christ. It's not. They're not going to go like these. Like this is like.
But you saw what happened to Mel Gibson.
But like
Mel Gibson got freaking iced out of Hollywood for years because he spoke against the satanic shit. you know? So like,
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. It's a confusing thing for me because I feel like on the one hand, like it's just limited hangout, and on the other hand, they like definitely don't want people like speaking out about this shit.
Well, look, the satanic shit like is really like not that far off. I mean, look at this article from 2011. African children trafficked to the UK for blood rituals.
Yeah, like that doesn't surprise me at all.
And
you
so
know, like
the
how many
fact that
kids get lost every year or kidnapped? Like it's tens of thousands of children go missing every single year.
It's the fact that we know that these things exist, and then everyone is treating it like it's just a wild conspiracy theory. When we can like validate these things by
And doesn't that show you how powerful these like institutions like Mossad is? You know, where
Mossad's a whole other thing.
But I mean, I guess I'm kind of thinking like the Epstein connection and stuff like that, where it's like, dude, everybody should be united about, oh my God, a movie about child trafficking. We should totally elevate this because more people need to know about this. But like the propaganda machine is so elaborate and so complex and so all encompassing that people will literally turn on their freaking liberal media and be like, oh no, I can't see that movie. That movie's bad because it talks about child trafficking and the guy's a Trump supporter. Like brainworms, you know, like just people. We're so elaborately
Completely lacked in the nuance. It's binary, just like
people should just we should just get away from like the party stuff and be like, hey, like let's just recognize for a moment that this was like a movie that's bringing to light something that's really important and something that's actively happening, and people should be more concerned that the media spends fucking 3 or 4 days talking shit about the subject. Like, I don't know, man. It goes back to what I'm saying. Like,
which is the most wild part about it. The most wild part about it is that when you see this movie, you walk away. You're like, "Where's Q? I wanted to see Q. Where's the U.S. government?"
And that's the whole thing.
I wanted to see the U.S. government. Where are they? There's none of the conspiracy is in there. None of it is in there.
Well,
it completely lacks any sort of substance of conspiracy, and it's ridiculous to call this a QAnon adjacent movie when it's like really the exact opposite. It's kind of heartfelt to me in the beginning. They show like this little like Colombian boy Miguel, and he had to find his sister who's like lost in some pedophile ring.
So here's the thing with that is that they can just it's one of those phrases, QAnon, where they just say it as kind of like a marker, as like a purity test to everybody who's in that group, that they like. It's kind of like the trans thing where like you have to go all or nothing if you're a real liberal, if you're a real Democrat, you can't have any nuance to any of your opinions. You have to go 100% on it, or you're against us, sort of thing. So they throw out, oh, this guy's QAnon, and liberals immediately know, oh, I have to avoid that. Yes, just like Himbo said, the anti-vaxxer thing. It's a purity testing.
When you're a liberal, you have to check every single box, and if you are it shows you can see it with Anna Kasparian. If you uncheck one box, you don't even have to. It could be a small thing like the Anna Kasparian situation. You're out of the group. You're out as soon as you should see. I haven't seen. Lemmy, she's blocked me on Twitter, so I don't see a lot of her stuff. But I did see a lot of her like rage against Anna and her comments, and it is the most like copious, like most self-righteous thing I've seen. It's pretty. I mean, maybe she should stop hanging out with those.
It's so crazy. I mean, I saw a comment from.
It's funny how she like
Anna Vigeland today.
She's like the savior of like. She's like this like civil rights and like prohibition lawyer or something, and then she hangs out with 4 white dudes on a podcast.
It's just that, I mean, that's kind of goes back to a bigger picture why I basically think like liberalism for the most part is just full of people who are.
That's where she's getting her info from. She's getting her brain is not on black liberation. Her brain is not on jail prohibition. Her brain is on those 4 white dudes who are sipping the same liberal Kool-Aid that all the other ones are drinking.
Exactly.
But I really want to focus this segment on that this movie ain't shit to when it comes to the reality, and that QAnon, although some of the shit like adrenochrome, maybe that's a little too far. That's not necessarily true. But
no. You can go. No. Go on WikiLeaks. Go on WikiLeaks. I'm gonna push back a little bit there. Go on WikiLeaks. Go look at Hillary Clinton's emails. Like there's
I know what you're saying. I know, and like I'm I agree with you. Like I'm in your camp.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm not willing to say that definitively. What I am willing to say definitively is that the United States is actively participating in child trafficking
100%.
and is funding it and through the United States border. And here are some things proof of that. Here's one really old Tucker Carlson segment.
Look at, of all people, who's the only person talking
it's
about
undeniable.
Child trafficking?
Exactly.
Now our southern border is open, and that's led to all kinds of problems across the country. But one of them is a dramatic increase in human smuggling and the sex trafficking, sometimes of children. So Kevin Lilly has been on this. He's the chairman of the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, and he joins us tonight to tell us what he has discovered. Mr. Lilly, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. So I don't think I've read a single story about human smuggling and sex trafficking because of our border policy. What have you discovered about it?
Well, I think that people that are in desperate, vulnerable, or distressed situations are always vulnerable to being taken in by criminal elements. And as you saw yesterday in Poland, for example, there was a mass rush on the Polish border from Belarus, and for the first time in history, the European Union is now going to fund, even from their most liberal countries, a border wall to protect against the migration of individuals. Now, before you really understand human trafficking, you have to understand the economics behind it. And as all criminal elements, it has, like we've discussed in this country, supply chain issues. And in narcotics, you have a supply chain situation where the drug has to be manufactured, has to be processed and ultimately worked through to get to the end user, right? And then you have a vial of cocaine that is used, but once it's consumed, that supply chain has to work essentially in perpetuity. And it's subject to its own disruptions, legal disruptions, law enforcement, etc. The difference, and that is a $350 billion industry. The difference with human trafficking and why it has become so enticing to the cartels and to the human smugglers is while it's a $200 billion industry and growing, and in some cases, Tucker, they think that it will surpass narcotics in revenue.
I'll show you.
The difference is, as disgusting and horrible as it sounds, you're dealing with human inventory. You're dealing with reusable inventory. And
they don't want you to watch
situations where you have 300,000 individuals in Texas, based upon a University of Texas study, are being trafficked in Texas now, including 80,000 children, ages 11 to 17. And so you have this, essentially, we are providing inventory to the cartels. So when you have an ill-defined or open border policy, well, the defenders of it believe that they're being benevolent, but what they're actually doing is providing free inventory, essentially no cost of goods, to the cartels, who then bring these individuals in, to which there is no escape. They're in debt bondage if they have to pay a coyote or what have you, sometimes as much as $20,000, narcotics, lifestyle, etc. And so when they are brought in, go ahead, sorry.
No, I mean, you just pointed out the deep irony, which is in the name of ending racism, we're increasing slavery in the United States. I mean, it sounds like you're describing slavery, people who are in involuntary servitude, selling their bodies for the benefit of others.
That's right. And you know what they don't want you to see?
That's fucking crazy, man.
Stuff like this.
Fucking Tucker Carlson.
Don't think this shit's not real? Don't think it's all fake. It's all just not It's all just a wild conspiracy theory. This is from 2 months ago. They had an HHS whistleblower. So this is Tara Lee Rhodes testifies on unaccompanied children again at the U.S. border.
Our final witness is Ms. Rodas is recognized for 5 minutes.
This is just crazy. This is just crazy.
So to consider this like...
It's like Iran-Contra with children instead of drugs.
But this is what I'm saying. Like, what if we said this about Don't Look Up? Because we can talk up all of the climate conspiracy that we want. And we can talk all about carbon neutrality and like reaching a carbon net zero, or which we'll get into in a second after this segment. But what's stopping? Why? Imagine the outrage if we smeared if establishment media was smearing that movie as a wild conspiracy theory, as some right-wing adjacent movie on an issue that is near and dear to a lot of people. A lot of people care about this.
I would make the argument that like child trafficking is way more existential than freaking climate change.
A lot of people would, but I'm trying to give as much credence to the liberals as possible. I'm trying to figure out their brain. It's impossible. It's not. It's so backwards that it's just.
Well, it's like the irony with the it's not kids in cages anymore. It's like migrant overflow
detention facilities. Yeah.
Yeah, like
afternoon.
Do it. And the other thing is like it really, really, really shows you that this hundreds of billions of dollar industry is so integral to the deep state. You know, so integral.
That's where they get drugs. That's it. A lot
drugs,
of it is based off
intelligence,
the weapons.
Like this is how they get all the compromat on freaking politicians and freaking celebrities. You know, this is like such a. It speaks to like the real conspiracy is recognizing that there's such massive cover up when it comes to child trafficking. It's hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, what do you say? $350 billion? Like that's bigger than what? The auto industry. That's bigger than what? Like you could come up with
that's like 1 year of the U.S. military
enormous,
budget.
enormous. You know, and that it just completely covered up. Oh, it's a QAnon conspiracy. It's like I wanna read Whitney Rebb's book now because
it's really not as small scale as they want you to believe. It's a much bigger issue than you think. The United States is like in terms at least when it comes
it's like
to South
part
America,
of the freaking GDP. Like when you're talking about $300 billion,
we're like central to the child trafficking scheme. Like, listen to
Chairman
this.
McClintock, Ranking Member Japal, and distinguished members of the committee. It is an honor to be here. I thank you for the invitation to share my testimony. My goal is to inspire action to safeguard the lives of migrant children, including the staggering 85,000 that are missing. Today, children will work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. Today, children will be sold for sex. Today, children will call a hotline to report they are being abused, neglected, and trafficked, and we don't know if they're going to get the help they need. For nearly a decade, unaccompanied children have been suffering in the shadows, and I have to confess I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021 when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with a crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of
that lady's going to end up getting suicided.
I just want to play that again for the folks in the back. She just said the United States is the middleman of a multi-billion-dollar child trafficking scheme. Does that sound like QAnon?
The United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children. As for me, my interest is the safety of the children. I do not view this as a political issue. I view this as a humanitarian issue. I assure you, my motives are the highest and want the children protected. So I want to tell you some of what I witnessed personally at the Pomona Fairplex. I saw vulnerable indigenous children from Guatemala who speak Mayan dialects and cannot speak Spanish. That means they cannot ask for help in English. They cannot ask for help in Spanish. They become captives of their sponsors. I have, as they've cried, to tell me the horror of what has happened to children as they make the journey to this country. I saw apartment buildings where 20, 30, and 40 unaccompanied minors have been released. I saw sponsors trying to simultaneously sponsor children from multiple ORR sites at once. I saw sponsors using multiple addresses to obtain sponsorships of children, and I saw numerous cases of children in debt bondage, and the child knew they had to stay with the sponsor until the debt was paid. Realizing that we were not offering the children the American dream, but instead putting them in modern-day slavery with wicked overlords was a terrible revelation. A terrible revelation. These children are a captive victim population with no access to law enforcement or knowledge of their rights. They are extorted, abused, neglected. And that is why I blew the whistle in 2021. I witnessed firsthand the horrors of child trafficking and exploitation. My life will never be the same after what I saw. But I have hope, because I'm counting on you. It's my hope that you'll take action to end this crisis, to safeguard the lives of these vulnerable children.
So, like,
it's so sad.
This is an obvious concern. Yes, Nick Rivera. This was 3 months ago. This is very recent.
Yeah.
So to consider this child trafficking scheme as if it's again like it's more wilder than it actually is. Actually, maybe
it's worse.
You I mean, you can see things a lot, not only with Epstein, but you know about Bryant's book. The name of that class.
Well, there's also like Nexium. There's like, I don't know. There's different.
Nexium's one thing. Trafficking ring that was in. I'm gonna look right now.
I don't know the names off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, I understand that there's like multiple. But the fact that it's $300 billion and that the borders are the way that they are tells me that the reason that the Biden administration gives for gaining entry into the U.S. relatively like straightforward is so that they can facilitate the child trafficking. Like, that we're being told that oh, we're just trying to like give everybody give us your, feeble, weak, whatever, hungry, give us all your people. And really what they're doing is give us all your people so that we can traffic them.
Yeah, this is something that's actively going on, and I would argue has probably been a centerpiece of our economy for a while. I mean, and what I was referencing before was the Franklin scandal, which was a child trafficking ring in Nevada in 1970 something.
Mm-hmm.
This has been going on. It does go on, and it's not a conspiracy, folks. This is real.
Not at all.
This is reality, and it's way scarier than you think.
Than a Hollywood movie. Yeah, way scarier. 300 billion is just that's an incredible number. That's an incredible number.
It's insane.
Every
the
single
black
year.
market itself is insane. The amount of Ukraine weapons on there and
damn. So we got do we have more that you wanted to? Was there more videos to that, or are we?
No. We could transition into.
I can transition to something a little bit lighter now, but that was a really good.
I mean, no, it's
really good. Just the
sheer
related. Numbers.
Because
the sheer numbers, when they're that big, 300 billion, 200 billion, whatever. When their numbers that big, that means that the government's in on it. There's no other way that like you can just pretend that that's just going on without anybody kind of paying attention. Like there's plenty of palms getting greased to make that shit happen.
Yeah, exactly. A big focus of this show is really narrative management, and really the way I'm like tying these two together. Like I'm making the Don't Look Up a comparison in my head, and really like we're talking about like the substance of like what conspiracies are, when the word conspiracy itself seems like it was just made up to like make
well, it's like that
like
that thing the CIA apparently came up with the idea of conspiracy theory. Like I don't know if that's true, but that's just something that I heard, that like the very concept of having ideas that run contrary to the government is a psyop in and of itself.
Because conspiracies are definitely a thing. Theories are definitely a thing, but I'm not sure who created conspiracy theory. That's a question for me. I don't know,
but it definitely turned into a thing where it's now bad for you to have your own opinions. But I guess shifting gears, should we do the one about Just Stop Oil now then?
Yeah.
Okay, so
because green energy has become a psyop in and of itself, and we've learned
so.
that.
And this one is like it gets pretty fucking obvious. So let me just start off with the article, and then I'll try and show a couple of the videos, and if it doesn't work, I'll have you do it. But give me just a second here. So I came across this article a few days ago. So I don't know for those of you who aren't familiar with Just Stop Oil, they're these freaking, you'll remember in a second, because they do these freaking little shenanigans where they pour paint on walls and hold up traffic and just do really kind of like ignorant shit that isn't really like activism as much as just vandalism and kind of inconveniencing people. And well, it turns out that the person who's one of the biggest donors for them, like, has been receiving subsidies from the UK government for over a decade, promoting green energy. So before we kind of get into what Just Stop Oil does, I'm going to read just kind of like a couple paragraphs of this, just so we can kind of get an idea, keep in the back of our heads where the money's kind of coming from. So, alternative energy companies run by Just Stop Oil and Labour Party paymaster Dale Vince have collected taxpayer subsidies of around £110 million over the last 20 years. So sorry, not 10 years, 20 years. Vince's company, Ecotricity, which we'll get to, claims it is, quote unquote, not for dividend company with its money, quote unquote, all of it going into our mission to green up Britain. But every laborer is worthy of his hire. In Vince's case, over £43 million pre-tax from the company in the form of salary, share buybacks, loans, and receipts from the sale of a subsidiary. Some of these payments, it seems, are more tax efficient than paying dividends. These financial details and a comprehensive debunking of many of the wild environmental claims Vince has been airing into public media as of late contain a recent Substack article written by the investigative net zero writer David Turver. Over the last 10 years, Vince has given the Labour Party about £1.5 million. Recently, the Labour Party said it would ban all new oil and gas drilling, interesting, causing widespread concern among its dwindling working class supporters. Vince has also given many hundreds of thousands of pounds to disruptive Just Stop Oil protesters whose loudest tactics have led to costly delays on British roads and irritation at major sporting events. Recently, Vince justified his financial largesse by telling The Guardian that, quote unquote, I do want to influence policy doing the things that I do. Let me see if there's anything else I want to read from this.
You know what a lot of this group reminds me of is and we should get into it one day, but like back in like the 60s, like activism culture, the merry pranksters who were like basically involved in the Grateful Dead gang and going around performing acid tests like for the anti-Vietnam protesters.
Okay.
Like it's I don't know. I mean,
the thing
is like a lot of this is just like a narrative that doesn't really go anywhere.
We're gonna see in a second, because I guess we'll just have you. Do you have is it easy for you to access the videos at this point in order?
Yeah, no, I can.
Where it says all the shenanigans. So we're gonna go through the shenanigans, and I just want you guys to keep in mind that he's given money to these companies, and I guess there's one more thing I should show really quick. So ecotricity, what is ecotricity? Okay. Ecotricity, he makes fucking wind farms, okay? So that's what he fucking does. So this guy who's funding Just Stop Oil, all he does is make windmills, okay? So let's keep that in mind when watching some of his antics, that this guy, he basically gets kickbacks from the government to make his windmills that we can prove, or at least have evidence showing, that are not carbon neutral and actually cost more money to make. And so you can kind of see that this psyop to get everybody hyped up about being against like oil and stuff like that is made by a guy who's trying to freaking greenwash everything. So with that being said, let's bring up some of those videos and then we'll kind of double back here. But it came across really clear that this guy, it's definitely a psyop. You know, this guy has vested money interest to freaking do this shit. So all I did was this is just Stop Oil's shenanigans. None of it is freaking like, let's keep in mind, if you are really serious about impacting climate change, the kind of things that you would do is like blow up oil tankers, blow up oil rigs.
Yeah, you would attack
blow up
capital.
pylons.
You would do things like France does. Like
you would do like entire bans.
BlackRock.
Yeah, like France does. Like shut down all the gas stations. You know, you would freaking make it so that you would make it really difficult for capital. You know,
This
but
was
what are
the
these?
main criticism of the BLM marches, because people just broke into fucking Apple stores and Target and stole a bunch of shit. When really they could have been burning down Citibanks. They could have been going after the Pfizer building. I mean, I'm not encouraging any of this.
Yeah, we're not encouraging all that stuff.
No,
we're not encouraging that stuff. But if they
but
were
I'm
real
just
about
saying,
it,
like that's like what
Play- like, let's
what the
just play- let's
BLM
just play-
kind of violence that
Yeah.
the violence that happened during the BLM protests of 2020 was not only ineffective, it was like purely nonsense, because like half the time they were
totally
attacking mom and
reactionary.
pop shops. Yeah,
it was completely reactionary. No message. Kind of like, I'm not shitting on the fact
that's
that
why
like,
you have, and
hey,
that's
a
why
bunch of
the
people
things
burn
like
shit
Kyle
down.
Rittenhouse
But
happened. That's why you have the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, is because people treated this as like as if like attacking a mom and pop store was some sort of center of power, and
people are losing their minds. People are losing their minds. They don't have an outlet, and the media that they consume generally points them in the most reactionary directions ever. You know, make everything about gender, make everything about guns, make everything about school shootings, and don't have any analysis to it. So people end up doing these freaking reactionary things. And I don't know. I didn't go deep enough to see that whether the actors participating in Just Stop Oil are aware that they're participating in a freaking psyop. But like, you have to be the biggest fucking idiot to freaking like sign up willingly to do this and think that you're actually helping, you know, the movement. So let's play some of these.
Let's see some of this. Yeah.
Ooh, really got him.
Who is this?
I think it's some politician.
Wait, who? Wait, is this someone important?
It's a politician.
Okay.
Just some like, yeah, one of the politicians. But all she did just threw confetti at. They're like, cool, you really ruined my wedding.
That's okay. That one's
like,
okay.
Really sending a huge message there. Like, all right, so this is Just Stop Oil at not at F1, but really.
There was a race car driver. It drove goddamn fast. Never did win no checkered flags, but it coming last. Jerry was a race car driver. He'd say, "Else I'm number one." With a bull sticker on 442, he'd light 'em up just for fun. get the dime for all things that man not do me. Now, Captain Pierce was a strong man, strong as any man alive. Stuck in his craw that made him retire at the age of 65.
Actually, yeah, like you've probably seen enough. Yeah, he said the copy. He mentioned the copyright. I was like, so anyway, I'm a big fan of Primus. So I'm sorry, Primus, that your freaking material got co-opted by. Yeah, got
James
taken
Hetfield,
by freaking Just Stop Oil.
James Hetfield would be really.
I've seen Les Claypool live like half a dozen times. So like,
you've seen Primus live.
I've seen Primus. I've seen Oysterhead.
Primus is great. You ever see Fish?
Yep, I've seen Fish as well. Oysterhead is freaking, what's his name, the head of Fish, with Trey Anastasio and freaking Les Claypool. I saw him at Bonnaroo. It was fucking sick.
Sick. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great music for like just.
I saw Primus. Last time I saw Primus was at freaking Red Rocks, and they were doing the like Alice in Wonderland fucking tour. So they had these like little midget guys dressed up as Oompa Loompas, and I was tripping on acid, and it was pouring rain.
Yeah, if there's any band
fucking
to get
crazy.
MK Ultra to, it's that and like Fish and like. You like the like the jam bands kind of.
Yeah, I saw at Bonnaroo. I also saw freaking Phil Lesh and Friends. That was on the last day, or the first day, I think, which was.
Well, let's hope Fish is nice enough to not strike this video. It's all right. We'll see.
So I think this is Just Stop Oil just holding up regular ass traffic. Okay, not really attacking Capitol, just sending a message. Okay, so what are these people gonna do? They're gonna shut off their cars?
All holding hands.
Okay. He's just
holding hands, as Al Gore told us to.
I've got his plate.
So you can see that they're not. That's not activism. That's not activism. That's just pissing off the people who are struggling.
That's pissing off other people. They're just causing more road rage. How would you react?
Yeah.
If these guys
I'd probably
were
tell them,
blocking you
be like, you guys are freaking getting.
Would you stop? Would you stop and try to be like, hey, look, you're being psyoped by Bill Gates.
I probably would if I saw some Just Stop Oil shit. Yeah, if I saw somebody doing that, I'd be like, you guys are fucking need to like, you guys are being psyoped. Like
to the people like Gamer in chat who like, and I want to get into this again more broadly. I even spoke to you about how I was like sort of like bought into the climate change thing and the environmentalism thing, simply because like there was a whole movement behind it, and it made some sort of sense to me. But now,
and there was a huge consensus. There was a huge consensus.
Yeah, but then
overwhelming
you start to see things like around you, like Bill Gates and Al Gore. They're still flying their jet planes. They're wanting now they're starting to say that like it's from cow farts. And then COVID happened, and then I think people started to really start to try to analyze what scientific debate actually meant. And when you
they wouldn't be trying to silence science. They wouldn't be trying to silence people. They'd be trying to figure out the best way to do it, but instead that's where you end up with all this greenwashing shit. And the people kind of like the point of my story is show that they're taking movements where, I'm sure there's people within Just Stop Oil who think they're doing something that's good. And they're just getting their idea, their want for what they think they need is like a clean planet, energy reduction, etc. they think they're doing a good thing, and they're just being completely brainwashed by these multimillionaires, these billionaires, these like evil people because they want to sell more windmills or they want to freaking their stock prices to go up. It's really fucking sad.
And see, that is the thing. And like someone mentioned, like Planet of the Humans too. Like this thing has been sort of capitalized and rebranded as like sort of like this green energy utopia. When in reality, I think the extent of what environmental damage that we do, like I'm sure oil is definitely bad. Fossil fuels are maybe not good, but
so I could actually add on to that a little bit because like a couple weeks ago I did my show on bread and circuses on freaking like the endocrine disruptors and like how there's basically just chemicals in the air 100% of the time that we're just breathing in and that we're just like living with all the time. And the FDA and the regulatory bodies have just let things run amok for fucking decades.
Do you know how
and
much
now
pollution that recycling costs? Like it produces like recycling is so like dramatically inefficient.
And that's
it's almost not.
and that's
worth
like
doing.
such like a perfect example because there's like one example, taking aside obviously like the private jets and yachts,
They
if
want it to be on
government
you.
was real
Like
serious,
throw out your cans in the appropriate place.
yeah, but
you're
not
just
every
going to do
state
anything anyway.
But then not every state requires it. Some states make you pay for it, and other states like in Colorado, they don't just come to your place. You have to like deliver it. So there's no
serious?
standard. Yeah, there's no standardization. Like
I've
granted,
never lived in a state where they don't take your trash. Really?
Well, trash is one thing, but some places don't make you. They don't make you recycle. There's plenty of states that don't encourage you to recycle.
$5 from Steve.
Appreciate you, Steve.
They're starting to make meat in the
and
lab.
That's part of it as well. That's part of it as well. They
The,
make money on that.
Yeah, that's part of the thing is like when the start saying it's because of cow farts, they'll never blame the military, and you'll start to see these discrepancies and these
obvious contradictions
hypocrisies that kind of hit you in the face, and and then you start looking a little bit more deeper, and you understand where a lot of this debate is actually coming from.
And I thought, and I didn't even know until I started looking at this that Just Stop Oil is actually a spin-off of Extinction Rebellion. So, like, the reason I got interested in this in the first place is because I remember hearing that Extinction Rebellion was funded by George Soros, and there is some evidence of that. But I didn't know that Just Stop Oil was just another part of Extinction Rebellion. So, both of these, they're obvious psyops. I wanted you to. Can you pull up the Wimbledon one, or are the videos just not working out so well anymore? We don't have to.
No, I got it.
This is a cricket one. Like the whole crowd is just booing.
No one wants
this.
No one wants
Let us watch our games. Let us enjoy our fighting circus. Yeah, they fucking hate these guys. That's actually probably a good one for the sake, because I think the videos might be skipping a little bit. I can kind of go off from there. So what's funny is you heard all the fucking boos from the fucking stands, which shows you a couple things, and I'll just bring up the graph here because there was actually a YouGov poll that was done a few weeks ago on fucking Just Stop Oil. Okay, so there's a little bit, it's a YouGov, it's self-reported, it's like not official. You can kind of like take it for what you want, but like, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the campaign group Just Stop Oil, of the PSYOP Just Stop Oil? And 51% have very unfavorable and somewhat unfavorable. Okay, some people, so between 50 and 60% of people, according to this YouGov poll, don't even like the freaking fake climate activists. Okay, so this PSYOP that these freaking 100 millionaires are doing to us aren't even really working that well. Yes, there are some people who are kind of like falling for it and getting behind it, but most people just find them to be an inconvenience.
I almost fell for that camp like almost like not fairly recently.
I started waking up to the climate change stuff probably within the last couple of years. I would say during the pandemic.
It was it was after COVID. It had definitely happened after COVID.
Once I started recognizing that, like, you have to recognize that vested interests impact policy, and that like vested interests are going to do what they need to do and not necessarily what's best for the people or the country.
I feel like it became similar like to COVID. It became almost like a parody of itself at this point.
Well, and I think there's something to be said that's like another thing is that and this is kind of, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because what's happened is that you have these oligarchs like this Dale Vince guy or George Soros who freaking command these powerful, climate activist institutions like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, right? And they suck all the air out of the room. Okay, so you have the cultural hegemony, the ruling class, co-opting people who genuinely care about the environment and would love it if we found some more efficient ways to produce energy and some ways for us to get some of our time back. And by the ruling class abducting these people and co-opting and appropriating this movement, regardless of what you think about climate change, they're using it for their own self-interest to prop up their own businesses. Okay, so I think that's kind of the big takeaway that I get from it, is that like this guy, like these guys, whether it's this Dale Vince guy, and I can show some more stuff. Let me see what else I got here.
Like pretty soon they're gonna tell you that.
So this is kind of funny. So I'll pull up another. I'm sorry, what was that?
No, no, they're gonna be like the way that they're pushing like electric cars now too, like kind of like pushing into like a new norm.
Well, and that's another thing is that
like Elon Musk cares about climate change? You really think Elon Musk cares about the planet?
Elon Musk isn't in the business of selling energy efficient cars. He's in the business of selling carbon credits.
Yeah.
So what's really, really, really ironic about the whole auto industry, which is probably warranting a whole fucking show in and of itself, is that a lot of the companies within the industry buy the carbon credits off of Tesla so that they can say that they're carbon neutral or meeting their goals when they're not meeting their goals. And we already know that Teslas are actually carbon positive before they even hit the road, as a result of how they mine the how they mine the freaking precious metals, and how they build the cars, how much oil they use just in production. Like there's no question that the second a Tesla is in the lot, it's already a sunk cost. So what did I'm sorry, I kind of spaced out. There was I think there was a freaking.
No, that there is one more.
Oh yeah, so here we go. So I wanted to show this really quick. So this is the same dude who's fucking funding Just Stop Oil. Okay, he also funds the Labor Party. I do want to influence policy, but not by buying access. So the way he does it is by having these Just Stop Oil clowns.
By buying access.
And that was the point that I wanted. That was the point that I wanted to get to, is like by having the ruling class appropriate these people who want to do something good for the environment, regardless of how you feel about it, is that they're making it so that the people who actually have the science behind them or actually like have like a good mission are never going to be able to get off the ground, because the ruling class have completely co-opted that movement. So they're sucking all the air out of the room before the people who actually know what they're talking about have a chance to come up with a counter-revolution. The people who have actually the science behind them blowing up pipelines and oil rigs, not saying you should do that, are never going to be able to get the kind of mass appeal that somebody like this freaking 100 millionaire is going to be able to get, because he's already sucked out the air room and he's already established the brand. So he's also kind of in a way perpetuating the system that we're in by protecting them and making Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion look like a bunch of vandal clowns instead of people who are fucking serious, because he doesn't actually want the serious people. He just wants to be able to make hundreds of millions of dollars off of subsidies. So let me see. I think
it's off it's they're bankrolling off of the next new thing. It's all based. It's stock market capitalism.
Well, it's funny. I guess I'll show. Where can I show it? Let me see. I think it's this guy. I'm kind of skipping over a little bit of stuff, but this guy actually calls out. Here it is. He actually calls out some of fucking Dale Vince's stuff. So Dale Vince, that guy of Ecotricity, okay, this is the guy who's been funding Just Stop Oil. He gets his subsidies from the government, okay? So he gets a paycheck just for building these windmills because UK decided through his successful lobbying by not interfering with the government, okay, but his lobbying ostensibly through stuff like Just Stop Oil, he's able to get money from the government anyway. So he's getting paid out by pretending to fight for change when really he's just greenwashing. So one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is that his actual brand, Ecotricity, is the most expensive form of electricity you can get in UK. Okay, so he measured it and he's like, if he's really trying to help people, why is he charging more money per kilowatt than everybody else? Let me see if there's a couple other things here. You can see that it actually costs more in energy per hour since trying to switch to climate change and all these like green initiatives than what it was before. So that's another kind of irony, showing that one of his big claims was that, green energy is reducing the cost of energy. It's getting us closer to net zero. And this guy was just kind of going through it and kind of just shitting on that stuff. Let me see if there's also... Oh, yeah. So this is a good one. Net zero is not cost free. So his claim that we do not have to pay more to achieve net zero is completely specious. The Public Accountants Committee estimates 1 to 2% of the gross domestic product each year to 2050. UK GDP was 2.491 billion in 2022, which means the cost of net zero is estimated at 25 to 50 billion annually. 1 to 2%, no big deal. Just 25 to 50
just
billion.
25 billion.
Not 25 billion, 50 billion, no big deal.
Just a couple. Just a little bit of change. That's all.
So it's just ridiculous to see. Like he sees the fucking dollar signs, and so this guy investing in a few $100,000 here and there. Let me see if I can pull up this other article really quick. But there was this other thing he just did recently. Where he basically matched a donor and raised $340,000 for Just Stop Oil in 48 hours on his end. So it was like a $700K, ended up being a $700K in the donations. So, clearly he has a vested interest in throwing, and we can't comprehend this. This is like one of the problems we have as just little worker bees, is we can't really comprehend that some guy who's worth freaking 100, 200, 300, $400 million throwing $500,000 into a little project is like pennies to him. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the cost of doing business. It's nothing.
It's chump change.
Yeah, it's like
in debt anyway. They don't even like these people. They don't.
It doesn't matter to them.
Cash.
So,
they exchange assets and capital.
It's really easy for a lot of people to think that when we see the zeros at the end, we just think that that's a lot of money, and that's like it's not the case for these people.
Drop in the bucket.
Drop in the bucket. So, let's see. Was there
That's why when you can get a slap on the wrist for like addicting half the country to opiates, Just a couple.
Yeah,
billion
yeah.
dollars.
The freaking
the Sackler.
What's
family.
the name? The Sackler family, exactly.
Yeah.
Freaking villains. They got a slap on the wrist. Were able to
It's chump
litigate through
change, but
every
you know.
individual state. Yeah, it was, compared to how much money they made, on the opioid crisis versus what they had to pay. That's what I mean. It's like, it's the cost of doing business. Like, Dale Vince, I'm sure was like, oh, you know what? I guess it's time for me to invest in a freaking, fake climate activist group before people who actually have a good head on their shoulders do it and actually make my life more difficult. But I think that's probably good for that subject. There's like a lot more into it, but I don't know.
Pretty
Like,
sure there's a video here.
we can go into some more videos if you want to pull up some more stuff. The thing is that I think it's really obvious that this guy's a fucking psyop. We can pull up some more videos and kind of illustrate something. Yeah, so we can show this. You can see this is part of him kind of massaging the image. And after going into it knowing that this guy he makes windmills, okay? And he's not paying for those windmills out of pocket. He gets money from the government to make these windmills. Okay? And that's what he does. So for him to go over here and being like, we need to change to green energy immediately and not have that context that he's in it to make money, really, really, really kind of like muddies the waters and creates a disingenuous argument on his part. So I guess we'll play with it.
There was a code for sustainable building that was in place. It had been worked on for years by the building industry. And just before it came into being, David Cameron took it away. He called it green crap. It was one of the things he killed off along with onshore wind. The other question, nobody is saying we have to give up living for this 10-year transition. It's about turning one thing up and one thing down. It's about not investing in new fossil fuels. We know we can't afford to burn them. It's investing instead in green energy, where we get more jobs and more GDP growth. Fossil fuels can't give us energy independence because it'll take 4 years, for one thing, to get anything new out of the North Sea. And once we've got it, 20 years later, it's gone. Fossil fuels are a single-use fuel.
And what about the man's point about the protests? Because obviously we saw protests at Wimbledon just yesterday.
Yes, renewable energy.
The Ashes. Yes, well...
I've got to say this.
I know, but I can't just give you an unlimited platform,
No, I
Dale.
understand,
You also
but
need to address the questions.
Such a big deal. I'm addressing the question.
Well,
you missed the House question.
Okay, no, and I'm glad you reminded me, but what about the protest point?
What was the point?
The point was you were saying that you were not enjoying the fact that sporting events were being disrupted.
I understand, but look, if you look at Wimbledon yesterday, rain stopped play more than the protesters did, right? The protest is vital.
Gaslight.
It did. Add the minutes up, it did, right? There's a lot of fuss
Yeah, but we
in our
can't actually
country.
stop the rain.
No.
But
Well, actually,
it's a decision to go in and spread jigsaws all over the court.
If you look at what's happening in the climate crisis, we're creating more rain, more events of rain and intense rain. So this is the climate coming home to roost in sporting events. And that will
So
be a
you
big
support,
deal
but
for
just to be clear, so you support what happened at the Ashes when people invaded the pitch and going on.
There's a great harm going on in the world. The climate crisis, according to the UN, has already killed 4 million people, and every year it makes 20 million homeless, right? That's a real disruption.
Okay, and what about...
Okay, so that's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good example of his kind of narrative control. And I guess with that, I'll just wrap up with a couple things on windmills. Now, I didn't do a huge thing on windmills. I knew that they could, like, it's arguable whether they actually end up being carbon neutral or carbon negative. I think there's a lot of debate on that. But just to show you some kind of ironic examples of how this guy knows that it's not a freaking perfect science, I'm just going to show you guys some stuff really quick. So here's one example. Okay, so many of Scotland's wind turbines are being powered by diesel fuel generators that are leaking hydraulic fluid. So you can just see that if it costs fossil fuels to run the windmill, and the windmill, we haven't even spoken about the production just to make the windmill. Who's going to argue in good faith that a windmill is carbon neutral if it's powered by diesel fuel? Okay, so I think that's kind of ridiculous there. And then I guess the last one, there's couple things to hit on with it, and then we'll switch over. Let me see. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. Okay, so this was kind of interesting. Now, again, I am not a climate scientist. I'm just one of those fucking idiots who does his own research. Okay, so We can yeah, maybe it's green diesel fuel. So I'm not speaking one way or another. I am, as we spoke earlier, kind of more of the opinion that green energy is more driven by profit than by actual existential threat. And I'm not really trying to get into an argument about that. I just think things are more driven by money at this point than they are by actual
100%,
use.
and it's been completely ousted. I think first by COVID, and then now through ridiculous shit by the next segment I got to, like blocking the sun out.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna read this stuff, okay, guys. I'm like I said, I didn't go huge into this stuff. I just want us to kind of look at some big picture numbers and kind of try and visualize how just to make a windmill takes ridiculous amounts of energy uh and labor power. Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs. So let's just look at a basic part of windmills first. First, from there, and going to expand and show many reasons why windmills are bad for the environment. First, let's use a five megawatt windmill as an example. This windmill takes some 260 tons of steel that is made from around 300 tons of iron oil, and it takes some 170 tons of coking coal. Coking coal, okay, that's a form of coal. It's dirty coal to remove the impurities from the iron ore. All that is mined from mostly open pits, using huge trucks to move the oil from the mills to use electricity to light up the mills and run the mills to reduce the ore to be handled. That doesn't even include the fact that there's probably slave labor involved, that there's child labor involved. We're not even talking about the imperialist aspect of it. All this takes many times more energy than the one mill could produce in its lifetime. So before it's even produced, just getting the stuff out of the fucking ground, it's already saying that. Well, maybe refining some of this into some of it in steel, but before it's actually a windmill, it's already cost more than will produce in its lifetime. Here we clearly see that already we have wasted a lot of energy to produce just one mill during that entire lifetime. They'll never generate as much energy as it took to build. This not include the amount of land to build the windmill on. The amount of land needed is another factor that is not discussed. One 5 megawatt windmill takes nearly 2 acres of land. 2 acres. This is just for one 5 megawatt generator windmill. Now compare the difference to say one natural gas fired generator, which can produce 500 megawatts of power. So that's a scale of 100, right? 100 times. And like the one gas fired turbine on 10 acres of land, it'll take 100 windmills on 200 acres to produce the same amount of power. Okay, this shows very clearly that windmills cannot produce an equal amount of energy as I can't do the math fast enough to keep up with that, but this shows very clearly that windmill energy cannot produce the equal amount of energy to produce one natural gas field energy, which by the way runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter if the wind is blowing or not. I'm not trying to get into the weeds there. I just wanted to show that kind of like I at least looked into this stuff a little bit. I think windmills are kind of like a huge fucking grift in the grand scheme of like climate change grifts. It's up there with freaking what is it, the carbon freaking absorbers? What do they call them? The ones
There's factions of like
things that suck carbon out of the air. You mean a fucking tree? You mean a fucking tree?
Well, since it's like a made up problem to like an impossible thing, like a carbon neutral country, like even people like I forgot who said it. I think maybe like Joe Manchin.
This guy.
Said,
I should thank you. Hold on. I'm mentioning this for a second. Thank you for mentioning hemp oil. I'm gonna put that into my memory and commit it to memory because like I think I should do a show on hemp oil because hemp oil really is kind of like I've heard that it has a crazy story as far as getting hemp oil out of being a widely used textile because it was too useful. So, and I think
you didn't know. Wait, you didn't know about that? The hemp
oil? I'm not totally familiar with the whole.
No, it wasn't hemp oil, but it was the paper,
the fiber. Yeah, because it
was too efficient for paper mills, so they actively put out the monopolists actively put out propaganda to make it illegal.
So
make it seem like people were smoking it and make it seem like it was psycho.
No, like that's always been something in the back of my head for freaking freaking years.
You should
10
look more
years,
into
15
it. Yeah,
years,
it's
20
pretty
years.
crazy.
People are always like, yo, hemp seed, hemp fiber, save the world. You can use it for everything. I've always heard people saying stuff like that, but I've never really looked into it. And I think that's probably worth looking into, because
I see a
I've
lot
heard,
of people on our side, like, I don't know, like, perhaps like being like an environmentalist made you like quote unquote like left or something at some point. But
I
I
don't
feel like
even
there's
think
a
I'm like
section.
an environmentalist. I just think that there's like things that we can do that
You know,
are
there's definitely shit that we're doing wrong. Like, the military is definitely terrible for the
you
environment.
can't have a serious
We
conversation about
definitely
trying
shouldn't
to
be
address
spilling
climate change.
chemicals like atrazine that are making the frogs gay into the water. We should probably be able to give water to Flint and Jackson and
That isn't full of
and
fluoride.
you know, these cities that are blowing up and basically becoming unlivable. East Palestine, all of those chemicals that uranium bombs.
It's
There's
crazy.
like it's
There's so
crazy
many.
how like
It's so crazy that
there's
if
only
like,
certain science you're allowed to talk about.
it's like
It's factions of science.
it just makes me think. It's like if
You
the
can't talk
liberals,
about that science, the East Palestine science or uranium bomb science or cluster bomb science, like the amount of time
if the liberals really knew how bad things really were, they would not
Yeah.
be getting caught up in freaking Just Stop Oil protests.
It's like
and
that meme
stupid. It's like
Himbo
yeah.
sent.
If you knew how bad things
If
really
only
were,
you knew how bad things really were.
it really is so much worse. It's so much worse. Like, it reminds me, because I did that show. I did like a ton of research on freaking forever chemicals and like plastics and like, dude, after figuring out that there's just like a level of toxic shit that's just in the air at all times. And so like the concept of trying to come up with like a clean environment is such a crazy like tinfoil hat thing that you can't even begin to have the discussion if you're not willing to have a discussion about PFAS or phthalates or forever chemicals. Like,
Yeah.
if you're not even willing to have that conversation, don't talk to me about freaking me using like an electric car. Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
like
we have we have shit, we have like turbo cancer being actively pumped into us.
dude, yes, and there was actually a study that just came out that was a bigger study. We can't. I'm careful not to talk. Careful not to talk about it, but there was a turbo cancer study that just came out. That was a bigger sample size than the sample size they used for the bivalent. I'll leave it at that.
I'm glad that we're making this connection between COVID and climate change, because I feel like they're really deeply seated into each other. They're like different. They're totally different industries, and they behave in different ways. But I mean, listen, like, you thought
You start seeing how they're like using language, and one of the giveaways for me for kind of whether something kind of meets the muster for probably being a psyop is if they make you be like 100% in on whatever their narrative, whatever their bullshit they're feeding you. And if there's something you disagree with or something you take issue with or something you want to push back on, you're canceled or you're vilified or you're like on the other side or you're a crazy right-winger conspiracy theorist. So yeah, phthalates, dude. Like, you saw, like, I was talking about that stuff a couple weeks ago. It's just scary, man. Yes, there's stuff to be had. There's a conversation. I guess I'll say, like, is there a conversation to be had about climate change? Not in the way that the people who are making us try and talk about climate change think we should be talking about it. Because if we were talking about it, we should be talking about like the food we eat, which not saying beef is bad and that we should switch over to freaking stuff grown in a lab, but that maybe we don't need to freaking put jabs in our fucking meat. Maybe like there's something to be said about not spraying plants with atrazine and glyphosate, Roundup and freaking Syngenta. Like, maybe there's an argument to be had about having like, wait, it's kind of weird how if you live in a city, you're not allowed to grow your own farm. Like, that's weird. That's fucking weird.
That really, really paints the picture of modern science today, because It's not, because now you can shape science to really say whatever you want. You can form statistics to make it say whatever you want. You can form whatever narrative as long as you cancel the studies, you don't have a control group, as long as you exaggerate the numbers like a little bit. It's the same thing with the Uyghur genocide in China. How they manipulated the data in order to make it seem like there was a genocide going on.
Based on one study by some freaking xenophobic guy, Adrian Zenz. I remember that freaking people still freaking believe it.
This is the era of modern science, and this is and the real takeaways are the giveaways when they like do ridiculous shit, like suggesting like you're gonna need like 15 jabs every month, or literally blocking out the fucking sun. This is a new thing. This is not new. This is not a new idea. Now this has been a Bill Gates backed project. Now it seems the White House is open for it. It's been fairly controversial for pretty obvious reasons, but in a 44-page report, it seems that it pains to say that it was not its own idea. The White House laid out a 5-year research plan to support development and eventual development of solar radiation management, or SRM.
So just a really quick question on that. Is this separate from chemtrails and like weather modification, like clouds?
This is the big questions that I'm not. So in order to like kind of, I guess, get an understanding of how.
Because I thought the whole point of chemtrails, I mean, I don't really know the whole point of chemtrails, to be honest, but like part of the understanding I thought was.
The point of chemtrails is that like, so like,
blocking out this
the idea of the conspiracy behind chemtrails is that planes are like
I mean, I've seen the weather patterns and shit. Like I fully believe
the weather.
I've seen the planes. Like there's no doubt in my mind that chemtrails are a thing. I just don't really understand why the government is doing it.
No, but I'm glad you brought that up, because like what this solar geoengineering is effectively climate control. Like, watch how they show like a small demonstration here.
Cry over climate change.
The cloud is gone, you get this rapid warming at a rate much faster than you would get if we had done nothing. If you've taken out the greenhouse gases that are adding to the warming, then the temperature won't go up, it'll stay what it is. So if we don't stop emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we don't try as hard as we can to do that, then there's no point in doing solar geoengineering.
A 2016 opinion poll conducted by the Harvard group doing solar geoengineering research found that 67% of subjects support its use. One reason this technology is appealing.
Okay, and how do you use geoengineering? What does it take to use to geoengineer a planet? Fucking carbon dioxide, you knuckleheads.
They want to use fucking the aerosol, like the shit that they're warning us about.
Study estimates it would cost an average of $2.25 billion globally every year.
That was like one of the like eye-opening things for me. Was like recognizing that carbon dioxide helps things grow.
When you see the scam, it really opens your eyes. It really
by 2100 if no action is taken against climate change. Or the 1.6 to 3.8 trillion for carbon capturing, another climate change solution backed by Bill Gates and by Big Oil. It involves sucking billions of tons of carbon
backed by Big Oil.
Air. And at 1 to
that's how you know it's a good idea.
Carbon collection, fucking bullshit. You mean a fucking tree?
Yeah.
It could be big business.
These fucking hucksters, man.
Yep.
Cheap that nobody currently stands to make money from the process.
But just because a solution is cheap doesn't make it a good one. It's cheap and dangerous.
It doesn't require a lot of materials. It doesn't require a big innovation. It basically affects the whole planet with one project. So that is not necessarily a situation that has a lot of profit opportunity, right? Because there's not going to be a lot of different people that can do it and compete in a marketplace.
Bill Gates is among a dozen individual donors and 14 foundations backing the first stratospheric solar geoengineering experiment out of Harvard. It's called Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, or SCOPEX. A high-altitude balloon will lift instruments about 20 kilometers into the stratosphere, where it will release less than 2 kilograms of different naturally occurring chemicals, like calcium carbonate and sulfates, and then measure the change in atmospheric chemistry and light scattering.
Fucking mercury.
The Harvard group that runs SCOPEX and other experiments has...
Isn't that the whole? Wasn't that
They're
what
not
they
going to
were
tell
railing
you.
us
They're
about
not
in
going
the
to tell you what
70s?
else isn't coming out in there. They're not going to tell
Weren't
you
they
what else.
telling us with the hairspray that was destroying the ozone layer with the greenhouse? Wasn't that the thing in the 70s, like back then?
Yes. That was.
It was the hairspray and the
Freon.
aerosol. And now they're saying
and then they
to
tell
do
you
it?
like Freon. Remember Freon in refrigerators? They used to say
Yeah.
Freon was really bad to like release in
The
the air.
stoves.
The stoves. And then in New York a couple weeks ago, they're trying to ban freaking wood burning stoves. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Get the fuck out of here.
Has raised more than $16 million, more than double any other solar geoengineering effort. And annual global funding has gone up from $1 million in 2008 to $8 million in 2018, with the majority of that funding coming from the US. The first phase of SCOPEX will cost around $3 million, with much more needed for wider research on solar geoengineering.
What?
To this point, stratosphere injections have only been tested with climate modeling. In the UK, a government-funded solar radiation management test called SPICE was cancelled in 2012 because of issues with patents.
We're not trying to develop any technology that
Oh,
is
we
patented
wanted to
or
make
we
more
want to make
money
with
off
the
of
state
it than they
on
were willing to
A
give
study
us.
last year found that no existing aircraft can inject the stratosphere at a high enough altitude, but developing a new high-altitude tanker would not be technologically difficult or prohibitively expensive. Nozzles still need to be designed that can continuously blast out
Okay,
trillions
now
of
they're
particles.
just straight up
And
just
scientists still
describing
It's
chemtrails.
literally chemtrails, isn't it?
It's chemtrails. That's chemtrails.
It's chemtrails.
They're
isn't it?
already doing it. Like,
need to decide what chemicals those particles should be made of. But unlike cloud brightening, which is another solar
Come
reflection
on.
technique, the tech needed for
Come
stratospheric
on.
injections is not far off.
The technology is not the main thing that's holding this back. The main thing that's holding it back is the uncertainty about what the exact effects would be and the positives and negatives of its effects.
So
bad,
you get the
bad.
idea. It's a very touchy subject that the White House is just at this point.
Well, I think it's
fuck
just
it.
another
Because-
grift for them. Hey, let's come up with a plan to address this one niche thing by doing this one thing that like a handful of companies will be the ones to figure out how to come up with funding to come up with this thing that will test this one interesting thing. They're creating a grift by creating the initiative, right? They're like, hey, we're going to start trying to figure out weather modification. Great. All the people who are full of shit and like on that entrepreneur climate change grift are going to be like, great. Now I know that I can get on the weather modification grift. You know, like he's basically giving the stamp of approval saying that, hey, come see the US if you want to get subsidies and you have an idea on how you want to pollute our skies. That's how my cynical ass sees it. You know, some lobbyists, some Bill Gates lobbyists were like, hey, we've been doing chemtrails for a long time. Let's just privatize it and make it a thing.
I'm going to be showing more, but
sorry, I don't mean to like.
When you get into the actual details itself,
dude, it was a
in
big
terms of
document.
weather-
That was like part of. I just didn't have the time to go through the whole document. It was like way bigger than the stuff.
I mean,
that was reading
honestly,
on
so when
fucking
you
C
actually
stuff.
go through this document, a lot of it is like speculation and just like what
making shit up.
It's really all just theory at this point because they don't even know if they can actually pull this off. You saw it in the video. They don't know if they can even build an aircraft that can reach that kind of altitude and spray it at the same time, and what kind of effects this has. They have no idea what it's going to do, and they're saying that it's your fault that you didn't recycle enough or buy that electric car or get to carbon neutral.
Yeah, it's
because
ridiculous.
that now we have to block the fucking sun because you didn't do enough to save the planet. And if you
Is that really the
pretty
argument that they're
jarring more
making?
than the language. What?
That's the argument that they're making, that the consumer uses too much stuff that creates waste instead of blaming the waste producers. That's like the did you ever learn how
fundamentally they're saying that this is they're saying the reasoning behind this is that climate change has become a fundamental threat, like to the point where like it's inevitable, where we'll have to do some crazy wild shit like this, like blocking out the fucking sun.
Yeah, not telling companies that they have 180 days to get their shit together and produce less freaking waste, or
no,
even
not
just
like that. No, not like cutting the military budget. Nothing like that.
it's just another grift. It's just another lane. You're gonna see the dumbest fucking companies coming out advertising freely that they're dumping fucking chemicals into our sky, and they're gonna come up with some like crazy name that's gonna sound all happy, like pleasant chemicals, pleasant skies, and it's like dumping fucking arsenic and freaking aluminum into the fucking sky. gonna be the fucking worst thing.
That's gonna be the next like build to Ukraine. It's gonna be it's gonna be the happy bombs.
The happy bombs.
The happy clusters.
Bombs for peace.
Bombs for peace.
Get the fuck out of here.
So they're aware. They're fairly aware of the dangers. They wear it out in this document, the White House document here. A variety of unintended outcomes of solar radiation modification are not well understood, and there may be others that which we're all not aware of. The known unknowns include potential changes in precipitation patterns, stratospheric temperatures, ozone amounts, sea level rise, patterns of climate variability, ocean acidification, productivity of mixing, terrestrial vegetation, coral reefs, biodiversity, crop production, and ecosystems. So this is affecting not just the weather, but also think about crop production and your food. Who is the number one owner of agriculture in the world?
Well, the biggest, he owns the most farmland in the United States, right?
Is Bill Gates.
Yeah.
The largest. So how do they put you under control is by controlling
it's literally
the crops that you can grow and controlling where it is. This is weather modification. Don't get it wrong.
And it's also
straight up all of the conspiracy theorists who were going off for years about weather modification and chemtrails. Maybe they weren't wrong.
I think
it seems
one
like
of the
they're
things that
already
really helped
doing
me, besides the pandemic, one of the things that really helped me come along and be open to these things and kind of doing my own research is not getting offended when people would like give me shit for doing my own research or thinking that I'm crazy for doing my own research. Like, dude, like these rabbit holes are so elaborate and there's so much evidence if you just fucking look. But the like media works overtime to hide this shit from you. It's just crazy.
They're even wary of the geopolitical considerations. They said the cooling effects. So they know that this shit is not just affecting them, but the whole planet, and that no one else is signing up to this. But it's their idea to block out the entire fucking sun for everyone else. The cooling effects of SRM would lessen the tendency of climate change impacts like food scarcity, water scarcity, and migration to exacerbate geopolitical stress.
Bro, sounds like a categorically terrible idea. It sounds like they want to fucking enslave us.
Could introduce other changes to weather patterns that cause problems and create separate geopolitical tensions.
We're gonna create a famine someday and then declare national emergency.
That's the plan.
Yeah, I mean it's like my cynical ass going there and being like, yeah, the stuff they're not telling you is that they can create a freaking health crisis and then create an emergency because of that health crisis.
Yeah, so don't get this mixed up, folks. This is straight up weather modification, and I don't typically like Fox News, but I do like this guy Mark. This is a good segment on what the actual grab behind this is.
100%
its fight against global warming may actually involve blocking sunlight. The White House posting research claiming, quote, solar radiation modification would enable better informed decisions about the potential risk and benefits of SRM as a component of climate policy alongside the foundational elements of greenhouse gas emissions mitigation. Our next guest warns this is simply government's way to control your weather. Mark Morano, publisher of ClimateDepot.com, and he joins us now. Okay, Mark, my take this morning was maybe this is one of those or else, get on board with everything else or we're going to block the sun. But I guess it's a little bit more reality than that. Tell us about it.
Well, this is actually Bill Gates funding this as well through Harvard University. This is retro 1970s. In the 1970s, they believed that our fossil fuels were creating aerosols, blocking the sun, creating man-made global cooling. So they came up with the same kind of geoengineering solutions back then. They wanted to put black soot on the Arctic to melt it. There was one proposal to use nuclear energy to help loosen the Arctic ice caps because they thought they were growing too much. And John Holdren, back back in the Obama administration also supported this kind of geoengineering, if you will, of the climate. This is radical, risky, unproven, unknown effects, but they're doing it as a sort of lever over us to say now in the Biden administration, kind of like, yeah, we know this is dangerous, we don't know the effects, but darn it, people aren't buying electric cars fast enough, or they're not embracing Green New Deal policies, so we have to risk our entire planet with this insane kind of research. It's basically weather modification. China's been doing it for years.
What'd you say?
It's still kind of a gaslight because, like, I think that they're just trying to open up another line of business to find government subsidies rather than actually trying to, like, do research. I think it's just another way for more companies to get in on the cash cow that is climate change. You know, so him kind of saying, oh, they need to do research, I think is like not really doing the full analysis of the fact that this kind of initiative exists with the purpose of allowing companies to exist that were going to poison our skies.
Mm-hmm.
Another form of what the U.S. government has even been doing. The ABC News, what meteorologists bragged about the
it's kind of like
they're doing to increase rain.
The beyond like he's still having like the partisan take, you know, he's still having the crazy like right versus left take where I think
I get that.
The real take is
preface it, but like I don't
right.
really like Fox for that. They did,
and I think people get that. But
this a lot, but it is correct what he's saying. It is weather modification. They said
it is weather modification, but I think they're doing it for money, not for research.
What it is, and to call it like it, this is just another pure perfect example of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, but
straight. Well,
but you're a crazy QAnon right-wing conspiracy theorist. If you freaking find a mainstream article talking about this shit,
it's insane. Here's a little bit more about what the potential dangers of what this actually is. It's just the last short video.
Climate change took its toll on 2017, making it one of the warmest years on record, and the U.S. most expensive disaster year ever. As the warming trend continues, researchers are exploring if solar geoengineering might slow it down, but they're finding it might actually do more harm than good. Solar geoengineering involves reflecting more sunlight back into space so the planet cools down. Scientists think if it's done together with reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, it might offset some of the effects of climate change. One of the most popular and feasible methods involves spraying sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere to form a cloud that would reflect solar radiation.
How would this help the ozone layer? I'm confused.
This is similar to what happens during large volcanic eruptions. Models have shown this technique might not...
Oh, so that's the other thing. So they're basing this off of volcanic
similar to what happens during large volcanoes. Could also...
Did you know that one volcanic eruption is equal to the carbon output of every single human being on Earth?
Yeah, it's crazy.
For 1 year.
Yeah, I believe it. It's fucking. I remember
just one volcanic eruption.
It's insane.
And then it's like it's facts like that, and then also the stuff like recycling that I talked about before about how it's grossly inefficient, about how it actually pollutes the air.
Well, what I was actually going to say, what was funny about recycling, because it kind of goes to another rabbit hole, is that the whole are you old enough to remember reduce, recycle, reuse?
Yeah,
the, like triangle with the arrows.
Yeah.
So that was a lobbying campaign by Coca-Cola to get us to recycle their plastic instead of them coming up with better reasons to like come up with better, more efficient, or less pollutant.
Oh, really?
Products. Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That's my understanding. Is that it was a Coca-Cola.
I didn't know that.
thing. Yeah, crazy, right?
That's insane.
Yeah. So total non sequitur, but like these. The companies are like 10 steps ahead of us. It sucks.
Reduce melting of sea and land ice, slow down sea level rise, and make it easier for plants to absorb carbon dioxide. But the risks might outweigh the benefits. Some models show if we start sulfur seeding and then abruptly stop for some reason, the planet might actually begin rapidly heating up, far faster than if seeding hadn't been used at all. The warming could be disastrous for ecosystems, especially fragile ones in the polar regions. Other studies have found sulfur seeding might also lead to substantial ozone depletion, reversing the slow natural repairs to the ozone hole above Antarctica. So before we go spraying aerosols into the sky, we might want to seriously weigh as many risks and benefits as we can. Scientists won't know all of geoengineering's implications until it's underway.
No brainer. Does not take 5 years in college to have that answer.
Did you ever look into any of the shit about the sea bioengineering? How they want to I'm not exactly sure what the plan is, but it's like geoengineering of like sea levels and like the water.
Well, what they want to raise or lower the sea level?
Like manufacture like lower and like raise like sea levels. Yeah.
I thought the whole concept of like the raising and lowering sea levels isn't really like a thing, because if you put like
I don't know, I'm not sure
you put
what it
ice,
is. It's like
you put
water.
ice in it. You put ice in a cup of water. When the ice melts, the water is still at the same level.
Right.
Yeah. So the idea of like raising and lowering, like, I'm not. It's just one of those things.
No,
that doesn't
a
really-
lot of the science, and like this is why I brought up the COVID thing too, is because when as soon as the science becomes manipulated to the point where it becomes fairly obvious to the average person, like, okay, this is a scam. This is obviously a scam. Like, this is like someone coming up to you with a collection of knives and saying, hey, would you like to sell some of these? You know, I can get you a good deal on some. You know, they sell for a great price.
Yeah.
And you totally buying it. Like, would you buy these knives? Like, would you buy this from like getting any sort of narrative from the government is like literally buying anything.
They're like used car salesmen.
Like a used car salesman, yeah.
Yeah. Like I mean, I've thought about that for the last few years, and I can't tell if it's just because I'm more aware, because the freaking
like the sales experience
like,
behind. I used to
sales
be
experience,
sales
like COVID kind of like woke me up to a lot of shit. So I don't know if I'm just like more aware of the psyops in front of our faces all the time, or if the government really is trying to like running out of things to fuck with us with. So they're just like pretending that we live in idiocracy and are just sending out the like dumbest shit ever just to like fuck with us. I can't tell if I'm just like more attuned to it, or if it is like getting worse. I think it's probably getting worse, but like at the same time, like,
well,
I think
the
we're
Simpsons managed to no.
Well, sir, you've certainly vanquished all your enemies, the elementary school, the local tavern, the old age home. You must be very proud.
No, not while my greatest nemesis still provides our customers with free light, heat, and energy. I call this enemy the sun.
Okay, so know what's really funny about this? I'll tell you afterward.
Since the beginning of time, man has yearned to destroy the sun. I will do the next best thing. Block it out.
This is Bill Gates.
Good God.
Imagine it, Smithers. Electrical lights and heaters running all day long.
But, sir, every plant and tree will die. Owls will deafen us with incessant hooting. The town sundial will be useless. I don't want any part of this project. It's unconscionably fiendish.
I will not suffer your insubordination. There has been a shocking decline in the quality and quantity of your toadying, Whalen, and you will fall into line. Now!
No.
Doesn't that sound a lot like the COVID debate?
100%.
It's basically the COVID and the climate debate.
So, yeah.
It's spot on.
Fiendish.
I will not suffer your insubordination. There has been a shocking decline in the quality and quantity of your toadying, Whalen, and you will fall into line. Now!
No. No, Monty, I won't. Not until you step back from the brink of insanity.
I'll do no such thing. You're fired. Take that, Boulderama. Take that, Convenient Smart. Take that, nuclear power plant. Oh, fiddlesticks.
So I saw something the other day, and I don't know if this is true, but I read that Matt Groening is like a level 30 Freemason, and that's why he's able to like have like his show is always prescient and like predicting the future.
Oh, like
because
predictive
because
programming.
because he's a Freemason, like a
You
high
think he's
level
a free?
Freemason.
Can you send me articles on that? Because I need to read that.
Yeah, he's
Futurama
like
was my favorite show for like a long time.
yeah, because people were like, he predicts everything, and then like the thing with the sun, it's like, oh yeah, that's
And
because
Donald Trump, yeah.
yeah. So
You've heard that too, Nick?
it's so
Yeah.
great. It's so great to see people in the chat being like, yeah, I've heard about that stuff. I'm like, oh great.
Yeah,
I'm
like
around,
dude, like it's crazy.
I'm around
Some
people
of the shit,
who
some of the
like
rabbit
don't
holes
think
you
I'm
can get
fucking
into.
absolutely insane.
Fucking crazy. That's why I have to block the sun.
But yeah, so are we? Was there more stuff with the sun, or are we switching gears to
No, let's head since
Okay.
since Himbo, like, because like Himbo did bring up the trans debate here, that it's the same thing with the trans debate. You're right, where like there's no debate allowed, and as soon as you step outside any sort of narrative, you're immediately canceled, shunned, and smeared as a right winger.
So first off, before we get it, yeah. So I'm glad. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I know it's running a little bit longer, but we got like a couple weeks to catch up on. But like Kim did this interview last week, and I felt it was really powerful.
I
and,
watched a little bit too. I thought it was really. I have some things to say about it too. So.
And the thing is that like I'm gonna keep talking about the fucking train shit, especially in light of what I know about like the endocrine disruptors now, and seeing that there's like clearly a contagion. Like on Thursday, I'm probably gonna talk about Gleason, which like is an indoctrination program. I'll get into it later. But like I talk about this stuff. It's not because I'm a fucking turf. It's because like I'm like concerned about women and children.
It's not at all about any sort of like hate towards trans people or any sort of like I have trans friends. I really do not care. I have friends that take hormones.
It's not, yeah.
Care.
It's like
you know
I
what
think
it is.
people are
It's
beyond
this
that.
predatory industry that is preying on kids and giving them medications and turning them into permanent medical for big pharma patients. It is this predatory big pharma that is coming for your kids, not only through the vaccines, but also through this new gender
So the gender identity, the topic
gender
of discussion,
affirmation care. It's the same
And,
thing
yeah.
with the renaming shit now. Like
But
first
let's
it's
be.
sex
I
change,
just want to.
and then now it's gender affirming
I want
care.
to. I want to make a definition really quick, just so there's no confusion. I think people generally know the difference, but like, I'm not necessarily like I feel like it's important to separate the difference between like gender identity, which is like the kind of like belief that people feel that their gender is not like associated with their sex, and then the concept of like trans people. Like those are two separate topics. You know, I think that the gender identity topic, which is like the indoctrination, the kind of like the belief system that's behind people who as of late are going through this like transitioning, and the actual people who like we should be in solidarity for, we should like respect them, we should like, you know, like assume that like it's a very 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 rare amount of the people in this community, just like in any community, that are like the total shitheads, and for the most part they're people just trying to live their lives. But what I want to draw attention to is that there really is a fucking huge push for this stuff. Okay,
You know, this blew my mind. Like when you see
raising
stuff like this
from fucking like they're saying stuff less than fucking 20 years ago. It was like 250 people signing up. Now it's fucking like 1,000 people, 2,000 people signing up.
It's too
5,000
much to
people
not
signing up.
attribute to Disney and to all of these companies
So-
that have been pushing this for
10 years ago in the NHS, so this is England, just England, little fucking England. There was just under 250 referrals, most of them boys, to the Gender Identity Development Service run by Tavisa, blah, blah, blah. Last year, there were more than 5,000, which is twice the number in the previous years. Okay, so it's not even just that it's like a steady growth every year. It's that there's a freaking huge freaking push to change the hearts and minds of like, I kind of think like teens and children, like minors especially, and kind of like easily influence others. But that's kind of like more of an opinion. I'm not trying to get us with that. The point I'm trying to make is that there is like, actually, I wanted to like just fact check, even though I trust Kim. I just wanted to show people that there is a legit rise. that the National Health Service in the fucking UK, okay, is doing studies as we speak on this stuff, okay? So like it's a fucking thing. Okay, so what I wanted to draw attention to, okay, the significant rise in referrals. So first off, this is regarding them setting up a study to address the sharp rise in trans-identified children and teens in the UK. Okay, so in May, they said in 21 and 22 there were over 5,000 referrals into the gender identity development. Okay, compared to 250. Okay, so that's some health, national health. Okay, in UK, like it's not some made up bullshit. Um, Scarce and inconclusive international evidence to support clinical decision making, and we'll get into this in the article. But it's important to see that what they call the standard of care, okay, which is just affirming the shit out of people. There is not a consensus behind it. There's not a study behind. There's not like a singular freaking belief system about it, okay, and so what they're kind of going through now is they actually just had a a an experiment group where they tested a bunch of people and kind of went through trying to adjust their program. And this is the UK. They're now specializing their transitioning youth program because it's getting out of hand. So while the US is like exploding this stuff and just trying to commoditize people's bodies, especially children's, there are other countries that generally are allies with us that are pumping the brakes. One of the big ones, I think Sweden, which was one of the first countries to freaking nationalize gender affirming surgery, was stopping it completely, except in like the most rarest of circumstances for children and teens. So there is like some pushback on this stuff, the stuff that we're getting from America. It's kind of like hard not to see after in light of seeing this stuff that it's not put through kind of like a lens that is motivated by profit. So with that being said, let's bring up. Want to bring up video? Just because I'm afraid it's gonna get out. But we'll start off at 6 minutes. And basically, like the reason I wanted to do this video is because like if you watch it, and I recommend watching the whole thing or at least the questions that I didn't freaking specify, because you can see Kim throughout this video getting more and more distraught. That like after watching this the second time, I'm like pretty sure that like Kim has like a personal kind of like she's asking these questions because she's a great journalist.
Does she have children? Do you know?
I don't know if she has children, but I think that she has like a personal interest in this particular subject matter.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I just
I think that she has like either close friends.
If you have any relation to kids whatsoever, if you have kids or if you have someone close to
She
you
has
that's younger,
yeah, or friends that are raising kids.
About this issue.
I think she's probably around people in her circle who are transing their kids, and she's like at a loss of like between standing up for what she believes in and like wanting to be respectful of these like these kind of tragedies.
Well, it's because this topic is so radioactive and you've received so much pushback by just simply talking about it or even questioning any part of it.
And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just like, I don't give a fuck anymore. This is really important.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't make any sense anymore to not question this. And the predatory nature of this industry is becoming large, and it's evident by this interview. This is very enlightening.
I would think this interview does somewhat a good job. But what's good to know is that this woman, before we get into it, this woman was also in front of Congress like a few weeks ago. I didn't have enough time to kind of go through that. Now it'll be like, I could have gone on for probably another hour, which is her testimony. But she's a therapist. She's been doing this shit for decades. She was in front of Congress a few weeks ago talking about gender identity and telling us that the standard of care, we need to pump the brakes on this shit. So it's not like she just like picked up some like random person. She wrote a book on how to, kind of approach this situation if your children are starting to show that they might have interest in transitioning. But it's good. Anyway, 6 minutes, I guess.
First, go into, I think that the big question that a lot of people have is how big of a problem is this actually, or is this just being hyper politicized? Because I have to.
And this is like the big.
This is important.
Pushback that you get is like, oh, this is not this is really not that big of an issue. This is like
No.
Don't. Why are you talking about this culture bullshit? Like,
Well, and that's
like,
a really important thing that I didn't even bring up, just because I feel like for people who are kind of awakened to this, it's a very, very well known that it's shot up to like 20% of children identify
like,
as LGBT.
like this is the
like,
point. Like,
it's great.
This is the
It's
pushback.
great that people are in an environment where they feel like they can express themselves how they want to. That's great. I'm not trying to take that away from everybody. What I'm concerned about is the indoctrination, and I think she does a good job kind of touching on this stuff, and it will kind of sets me up for Thursday, to be honest.
When I go about my daily life, I don't run into, I'm not being assaulted by trans people. I'm not seeing this thrown in my face everywhere. And I live in Los Angeles. I'm not seeing.
It's a good question.
This is a huge problem. I'm not seeing children that are transitioning to trans. I hear about this in the news. My sister's a school teacher. She says that there are students, but tell us how big of a problem this actually is. Is this something that's grown? Has it always been this big? We just never talked about it?
No, not at all. It was until very recently, until about 10 years ago, gender dysphoria, which is the intense feeling of discomfort with one's body, with one's sex body, it was extremely rare. And when I went to medical school, 40 years ago, when I was in med school and did my child psychiatry training, it was so unusual. The cases were so rare that none of us ever expected to see even one person in our entire lifetimes with what was called then gender identity disorder. It was something that you read about in a textbook. That's how rare it was in children.
Yeah.
So yes, it is something very new, and it's
in children, mind you. I feel
Yeah,
like that's
well,
important.
like there's like a little bit more. I'll have you pause in a second.
the rates of kids who suddenly proclaim that they are identifying as the opposite sex or some other gender are actually up about 5,000% just in the past 10 years.
Yeah, the articles I pulled up said 4,000, but they were from a year ago.
Yes, this is something that is something new in our culture. And the reason why people, and parents especially, have to be aware of it is because many of us in the field see it as a social.
All right, pause it right there. Pause it right there.
And I'll explain to you what I mean by that.
Okay, so I just wanted to establish that she's saying that it's a social contagion, okay? And that, 5,000's freaking insane. So remember, I read an article from a year ago that said 4,000. So the fact that's gone from 4,000 to 5,000 a year is problematic. So people, and the 20% figure, and the fact that you got to think that like doctors who have been doing their profession for 20, 30, 40 something years, like they went to school and they were taught about this stuff, and it was called gender identity dysfunction or something, JID or something similar. But she says, she's like, I'd be lucky to come across one patient in my entire fucking life, like doing my job. On 1 in 10,000, tens of thousands. Okay, so I just think it's important to consider that, like, most of the doctors, so when we talk about standard of care, you got to think that most of the doctors that have been doing this stuff for decades, like, were taught that they would come across it, they would be lucky to come across this once in their entire fucking career, and now they're seeing 1/5 of freaking kids and teens coming in and saying that they're trans or like LGBT, okay? So they're saying the 5,000% increase. Like, these people like are ill-equipped to handle that kind of growth. They don't have the understanding. So we have to recognize that these doctors are people too. They're people too, And where they're getting told the standard of care, it's because they don't have the frame of reference, because they were taught 30 years ago that this was something that would come up maybe once in their entire fucking careers. Okay, so I just really wanted to kind of nail that point across, that like this woman I think is brilliant, and I think she brings up a lot of good points, and I think one of the salient points to take away is that these doctors are people too, and when you hear them regurgitating narratives that there's, oh, puberty blockers don't do anything wrong, oh, this stuff's reversible, blah 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 blah, all this fucking crazy shit, you need to think that they're coming from a place, they really are coming from a place of ignorance. Okay, so you really,
it's the same thing with the opiate crisis.
Yes,
remember when
exactly. Great.
Remember when the Sacklers gave out all these Oxycontins, and there were these Oxycontin prescriptions. They were saying, "Oh no, it's safe. It's not addictive.
It's less addictive.
It's
less addictive.
And they got the entire country addicted to fentanyl. And no one was punished. No one was punished.
And that's what's happening here. And I saw that.
That's what's happening
the
here.
Cosmetic surgery industry is expected to grow to fucking
big
$5 billion in the next couple of years or something. By 2025, $5 billion industry. So like there's plenty of vested interest, but for the sake of time, like I do a lot of this, I research a lot of this, but we could probably skip to, was it 9? Just really quickly, 9 minutes. But just keep in mind that, like, and for the doctors out there, I don't know if Dr. Nick Rivera, like, I'm not like shitting on anybody's expertise. I'm just saying that they came from a place where they weren't taught this stuff, or they were taught.
Well, doctors are humans too. They're not.
Yeah,
it's not
they're
like
humans too. So
people.
It's okay to be like, what's like, to not trust the science and do your own research. Like, it's okay, because these people are coming from stuff that they learned from a textbook 30 years ago. Okay, they're the people freaking affirming kids. So like the idea
it's not just that. It's not just that. It's the parents too. Which
it's the parents too, but
and it's also the culture. You have to ask yourself where these things are coming from. Are we actively encouraging this culture? And you have to ask yourself where are the sources that are enabling this.
Yeah, I do.
And what are the better ways to do it?
And that's kind of like the part where I'm trying to figure it out, where like it's almost like you can try and figure out where the next psyop is going to come from by how compassionate people get over a topic, because you don't fucking want to talk against trans stuff. You don't want to talk against that stuff because like you have a trans friend, like somebody who's trans, like like it's not like an easy thing. And like most humans, you want to like be compassionate, and you don't want to be that asshole, and you don't want to be like, no, like those aren't your pronouns. Like you don't want to be that. Most people want to be cool. When you see somebody having heroin chic, I guess, but it made me think about this. If you see somebody having a hard time with drugs, like, despite what you see on freaking social media, I think most people feel bad for the person who's fucking strung out on the sidewalk. I think most people want to be compassionate for that person. So like,
here's the fundamental difference about like what's occurring here is that those like art and the people that we're friends with are adults, but the people that like who's being targeted here are kids
and teens.
Kids who we will all agree they can't vote, they can't consent to sex, but they can just suddenly decide whenever they want to get a life-altering surgery that will turn them into a big pharma patient for the rest of their life. What if they lose medical insurance? Do you want to bankrupt them? What do you want from them? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
At some point, you have to ask yourself, like, how much of this is just like erasing, like, really what quote unquote gender affirming care actually is actually erasing a lot of what gender is, because gender and sexuality is supposed to act as a spectrum, right? Like you'll see a lot of feminine guys, you'll see a lot of masculine women, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of like gay guys who are like fairly feminine on the feminine side, and they don't identify as a female. They're just a gay dude. And what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that.
One of the really ironic things.
You don't need to change. You don't need to go through life-altering surgery in order to affirm your identity. You can be whoever you want openly without having to rely on the big pharma middleman who's going to sell you some drugs for the rest of your life to do it for you.
One of the things the pretzel people like to say is that like gender affirming care bends stereotypes when actually it kind of reinforces them.
Exactly.
So, like you're a guy that likes to wear flats once in a while. Oh, like you might.
So then you must be a girl. You
must
have to be a girl. Otherwise, you're anti-trans.
You're a guy that likes to wear his hair down to his ass crack. Oh, you must be a fucking girl. Like, oh, you shave your legs. Like, you must be a fucking girl. Like, I don't know. That's one of the things that I see happening here is that like, it's actually reinforcing gender stereotypes instead of what we're like. If we really want to get away from gender stereotypes, we should be okay with the kid who wants the guy, like the little 4-year-old who wants to wear a dress once in a while. You know, we should be okay with that. Like, who cares? Like, if you want to express yourself that way, like, however, if you're like okay with being who you are, then like gender identity doesn't mean anything because we've already broken down those stereotypes. Like, that's the level we should be getting at right now. We shouldn't be getting that to the place where we're trying to.
That's the problem is that like whenever you push back on the like anything that has to do with, hey, maybe we shouldn't be manipulating the consent of children, and maybe we shouldn't be doing medical surgery on them without their informed consent, which they can't consent to.
And even adults aren't consenting. Like, I'm positive if you look up fucking vaginoplasties or phalloplasties, like you can tell most people on Twitter who fucking swear up and down that they're trans rights activists and that they're already like have started transitioning or whatever. I know more about that fucking shit than they do. Like the stuff you see, they twist off people's arms, try and freaking like append it like it's freaking Frankenstein shit. You know, so I don't think there's any real informed consent at all, whether you're, especially if you're a kid, you know, especially if you're a kid, but also if you're an adult for sure.
But that's the interesting part of the conversation is like that's where the goalpost of the debate has gone to is that like now like ever since we've changed the language from sex change to gender affirming care, now it's transphobic to push back at all against any sort of medical intervention on your children whatsoever. And that includes whenever they want to change their gender. If they want to go to Minnesota and go get or like Mississippi, I forgot like which one was like turned into like trans sanctuary state recently. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Like they can go there, they can go get a dick or get a hole, a bonus hole, which I think they're talking about.
Yeah, that's what they're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. And there you can't do anything about it. This is your kid. You can't do anything.
Well, in California now, I think they're trying to pass a law that says
they're going to do that in California too.
If the kid says that they're trans and the parents say that they're not trans, that they can be taken away by child services because that's like the better and right thing to do.
Yeah, so ultimately, that's the part that like that really confuses me about this conversation is that like where like I like just based off of you and me talking right now, we're trying to approach this in the most fundamentally like honest and genuine like unbigoted way possible. Like we said, we have trans friends. We like trans people. There's nothing wrong with it. But to say that like gender mutilation, the sex changes on children are not controversial.
Yeah, like,
you have to be out of your
crazy.
That can't be just a conservative issue. It can't.
No.
It
just like child trafficking. There's no way.
Plenty of parents who will never. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just play this.
I heard of cross-dressing. What is the difference between somebody who is there a difference? Were cross-dressers when I was a kid? Was that just like, okay, it's a man who likes to dress in women's clothing, and that's more, yeah, it might be kind of strange, but maybe that was the precursor. Like they weren't ready to say, I feel like a woman. I just like to dress in dresses. I mean, is there a difference between cross-dressing and gender dysphoria, or was that just a light way of saying gender dysphoria?
This is an excellent point that you are bringing up, Kim. What I want parents to understand is that gender dysphoria is a symptom. For example, like fever is a symptom.
Okay, you can pause it right there. I just wanted her to say that really quick. We can skip around a little bit on this. But like, so she says right away, and I think this is really important, okay, because what's happening right now, especially when she starts getting the standard of care, is that they're addressing a symptom, they're not addressing a cause. These are doctors, remember, who studied this shit 30 years ago. When they're addressing gender dysphoria, they're addressing a symptom, they're not addressing a cause, so they're not fixing anything. So she goes on a little bit to address that there's kind of three different types of people who identify as trans for at least temporarily. And for the sake of time, I'll kind of list two of them. We kind of already know, but there's the people who like Jazz Jennings, if you've ever seen I Am Jazz, who go on that show and they say from they're like 2 or 3 years old, you know, regardless, we could have a whole talk about whether their parents kind of influence that decision making. They say since they're kids, oh, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, from when they're really young. Then there's also the people who are adults, you know, people who came like maybe much later and developed gender dysphoria. They came out when they were like 20s, 30s, whatever, and decided I wasn't a boy, I was a girl, I wasn't a girl, I wasn't a man, I was a woman. And they go for that much later. And then if you want to skip to 1205, she talks about the third part, which is the part where you're seeing this huge spike called, which is kind of being colloquially called, I don't think it's in the DSM or anything yet, but it's being called rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is where the social contagion comes in. So when you're seeing the stuff where the 4,000, 5,000% increase over the last few years, you know, it's mainly from the rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's coming from the kids and teens. So I guess
some people would say fourth or fifth, but let's, for the sake of argument, we have another type of gender dysphoria, which is rapid onset. It's happening in kids that never before expressed any discomfort with being a boy or a girl. They may have been tomboys or more feminine girls. That's possible, but most of them weren't even that way. Most of them were completely, and some of them even super stereotypical, girly girls, masculine boys. And I hate to get stuck in these stereotypes, but
see,
this ideology.
That's what it does. The ideology forces you into the stereotypes.
So if Snow Himbo's
sexuality should be fluid.
That's why
like
the pretzel. That's why we call them pretzel people now, because like they just contradict themselves in these like weird arguments all the time. Like she's saying, like we're supposed to be getting away from gender norms, and this fake trans movement kind of reinforces gender norms. And like
exactly.
what I wanted to talk about earlier was that you said that like one of the things they're doing right now is they're, instead of making it about like a sex change, they're making it about gender. Well, like one really interesting thing, this is like more of like a philosophical conversation, but like one of the bigger things that's happening here is by making it about gender, they're making it something that isn't connected to reality. That's kind of like the idea where this is like gender identity as a whole religion thing. But what it also does, it's also disassociating you from the material reality. Like your sex, you can like look at your under your pants and you can see what sex you are, you know? That's like you're grounded to that. When you came out of the womb, you came out that way, you know? Gender, regardless of what you think is going on in your head, as she is saying, that's a symptom. You know, that's a symptom to a cause, whether it's depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, any number of things, you know, child abuse. It could be a million different things that could be causing it. But kind of lost my train of thought, but you can see it's
no, the normalization of all of these operations opens the door for things like, you know, the chip and Neuralink and cyborg
I definitely
arms.
think that like
so like this is like where like this is like really where the you know where the transhuman kind of like agenda comes from. But
I'll
that's
say
an
a little
even
bit, but
topic. That's a Stephen Colbert thing. That's a
thing, yeah. But we can
Colbert. I mean,
let's play a little bit more and see what she has to say.
So
yeah, she's talking about getting away from the stereotypes. That's right.
Yes, there is a world of difference between the middle-aged man who has gender dysphoria and the little kid who's 4 or 5 years old and has gender dysphoria. And now we have these thousands and thousands of kids, tens of thousands most likely, who are suddenly identifying as a sex that is inconsistent with their bodies. These
they're in a position where they feel like they can say something, or is this genuinely, or does it genuinely happen later in life?
You can pause
Like
it. You can. That's a good place.
Say this is
You can skip to I guess 14. So she's just showing that there's like a different.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Then that's good then.
I agree. I feel like this is a mental illness. This is not like, oh, you're just born this way, and of course you're supposed to be transitioned into the other gender. That to me is obviously a mental illness. So is this a mental illness that suddenly shows up later in life, genuinely, like it can manifest? Something that we all have to be a little bit afraid of now. Our husbands might suddenly later in life say, "I feel like a woman," or is it something they always felt from the time they were born?
Okay, so let me just begin. Let me just say, first of all, gender is very complicated. Gender dysphoria is complicated, and people in general are complicated. So, this is something that I would not venture to be making very many sweeping statements in terms of,
You can go to 15.
The older population, the middle-aged population, which is mostly
Unless you're
men.
just about there, it doesn't really matter. But
it is mostly men. Yeah,
we're seeing that. We're kind of seeing that now, I think, which is interesting. But yeah, are you at 15? So next at 15, yeah, this couple minutes is actually pretty good.
Are some of them the same as those kids that very early on, like Jazz Jennings, was convinced that they're a girl? Well, to answer that question, let me tell you the following. We have 11 studies, a total of 11 studies on those young kids.
I'm gonna follow up with this stuff.
That have followed them into young adulthood. And these studies were done over decades in different places in the world, different kinds of clinics. And they all said the same thing. They all showed that if these kids just go through normal puberty without any medical intervention, the vast majority of them, in some studies, 90% and over, will sort of, let's say, grow out of it. They will reach a point of being happy with their bodies. They no longer want to be the opposite sex. A lot of them are gay and lesbian, and they reach a sense of comfort with who they are, including their physical sexuality.
So that's good.
So
that's good. I just want to point that out really quick. Like they did studies all over. Like I said, I'll follow up with this because this is kind of interesting in itself. But they did studies following people around all across the world for decades, and they all had pretty much unanimous conclusions. She said over 90% just ended up like growing out of it. That's like, that tells you that it's not what we're being fed is manufactured, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
And that there's plenty of evidence that I think
You said you had data you were going to show?
I'm gonna follow up. I'm gonna look at this stuff. I'm gonna look at the 11 studies up. I'm kind of curious what she's talking about there. But okay. I think that like she's showing that, she's trying to show that like obviously medicalizing people is not the way to treat people. Kind of just gets back to the whole like you're treating the symptom, you're not treating the cause.
And the same thing with the opiate crisis. I just want to compare it to that. Same thing. Push medical institutions.
I mean, I guess because they give people fucking
solution.
What's the shit that you would get the freaking little strip if you're coming off of freaking heroin?
Oh,
Suboxone.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why I know that.
No, there's Suboxone. There's also the one
buprenorphine.
No, there's one that starts with the M. It's not morphine.
It's never mind. We're getting way off topic, but
yeah.
But that's we could probably skip to 17. So we talk more about, I think, rapid onset is kind of the big issue here. Yeah, methadone.
Increase. Those, the majority are girls.
Okay, wow.
The majority of them have pre-existing mental health issues.
Yeah.
They have autism, depression, anxiety, ADHD that preceded their new gender identity. So this is a totally new group of people. And what's happening in gender affirming care is that the proponents of gender affirming care are lumping everybody together.
Yeah.
So it's as if, just getting back to that analogy that I gave you a few minutes ago, that we are dealing with a symptom. So if we have 3 different people, and one of them has a fever due to having the flu, and the other has a fever because they're dehydrated, and the last has a fever because they have cancer, we can't lump those 3 together. They're completely different. And that's how we have to look at gender dysphoria, this new group that we are now dealing with. That's now a social epidemic, a social contagion. We used to have 20 years ago, Ken, we had 2 clinics to help these families who have a child with gender dysphoria, 2 clinics in the entire world. One in Toronto, one in the Netherlands, in Holland. Now we have, only in this country, in the United States, at least 100.
Yeah, so that's crazy. That's a good start.
That's crazy.
That's a good. That's just. So yeah, just driving home again. As I mentioned earlier, these doctors, they studied this shit like 30 years ago. She said she studied probably 40 years ago. They didn't have this information. She said we had 1 or 2 gender affirming care clinics across the entire planet 20 years ago. Now there's 100 in the US alone. Okay. So clearly, like, it doesn't make any evolutionary sense. You know, you don't have to really think about this and think that people are just pumping out more babies that happen to think they're being born in the wrong body.
Just out of nowhere.
That's the conspiracy. Okay.
Yeah,
That's the conspiracy.
Yeah, that's the conspiracy theorists. That's what they're.
That what, like, give us a number. What percentage grow out of that? Is that, when you say the majority? I mean, that could be 51%. Or that could be 95%. So what percentage actually grow out of it from those?
Okay, so going back to those 11 studies, they ranged the persistence. Well, let's do it the other way. The desistance. Okay, persistence is staying, the gender dysphoria remains, and desistance is that the gender dysphoria is resolved. So the percentages in those studies ranged from something like 60% to over 90% desisting.
Wow. Okay. So what is a parent who's genuinely dealing with a child
Skip
like
to 27.
This?
That's kind of interesting. That's kind of like what we were saying earlier, where the pretzel people are doing mental backflips.
That what they're doing is the right thing. But you see, the gender ideology is so destructive. It is, what it does is that these kids that don't fit in the box of stereotypes, which, oh my gosh, I mean, when I was growing up, that was the whole thing. We're anti-stereotypes. We want to take these stereotypes and put them in the trash.
Right.
Okay? And we're supposed to be beyond the stereotypes. And now, very unfortunately, we have an ideology that is telling the kids that if you are a more feminine boy and you are interested in more feminine things, then you might be transgender. And they're being put on the path, this dangerous path that leads toward medicalization, when the only thing that's going on is that they happen to be a more feminine boy. And we have to acknowledge that all of us are a mosaic. We are a mosaic. Each one of us, you are, I am, of more male and female characteristics. And every mosaic is beautiful and fine. And we should not be placing kids on a path toward any sort of medical harm to their bodies. This is what is disturbing me and so many other clinicians at this time, is that we are putting kids on this path.
Okay, I'm just thinking about this too now. So what's
this is the biggest hypocrisy, and like, this is, to me, after listening to this interview, the most salient point I've heard against the trans, ideology pushback, is that it is actually,
they claim,
more gender stereotypical than what regular feminism would be, which is to erase stereotypes and to have that flexibility of being a masculine female or a feminine male, and it's like she said, every character is a mosaic. Every person is beautiful and fine and great, and like they're perfect. They're great the way they are, and what these medical clinicians are doing are effectively forcing people into a path that reinforces an identity that they may or may not agree with.
They may not agree with it, and I think like so we see 20% identify as LGBT today. We don't even know what it's gonna go up to, a couple of years from now. So, what kind of impact is gender identity going to have on children going through school who are actually being taught that, like, first of all, they're being sexualized as minors, but secondly, that they're actually being taught that the spectrum exists within, like, transitioning, and the spectrum doesn't actually exist within the binary, if that kind of makes sense. Like, they're trying to take away, like, the ability for people to just be themselves and be on that spectrum, and are actually reinforcing the gender norms. It's really kind of like it's bizarre. One of the things that I actually saw recently is that, what if there's actually a contingent of, like, parents out there who would rather see their kid transition and marry somebody they think is, like, of the opposite sex, same sex, because they would rather have that transitioned son or daughter be married to somebody with the appearance of being from the opposite spouse than have, like, a gay child. Like, that's a thing now too. But yeah, so I guess 2855. So it's pretty clear they're saying it's like a mental illness also throughout this whole thing, which, like, that's turf language if you're, like, a rational thinking human being. We're not saying that mental illness is bad. You even heard Kim say in the beginning.
I think Kim's pretty fair here.
Dude,
she's like,
she even says, like, way in the beginning, she's like, people, like, kind of, I call it claiming victimhood. You see it on TikTok all the time, but, like, she basically says that, like, everybody is all stoked about having mental illness and pretty much proclaim it for the whole world to know these days anyway. Like, that definitely happens. You see that on social media all the time where people complain. Like, don't even complain. They kind of, like, lionize their like, mental condition. Oh yeah, I'm, like, just, you can just think of things, but, like, no one's kind of shitting on mental conditions. They're just recognizing that, like, gender dysphoria exists in people's heads. It doesn't exist in reality. And so you shouldn't be treating something that exists in people's heads by chopping off their dicks and giving them fucking medications for the rest of their fucking lives. Like, let's treat the thing up here, So where are we at? Yeah, like 20 something. Yeah, 25.
Right? I mean, teens always went through
This
phases.
is a social contagion.
The new phase of the day for that group of teens, and it does seem like today's teens, it is about having mental illness. I'm really amazed at, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but teens do seem to be very open about their mental health these days. When I was a kid, it was like, you don't want to talk about being depressed. It has a stigma to it. But now they're all saying, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I mean, they're willing to say the most elaborate mental illnesses. They're just own it, and they're proud of it almost. And one of those would be, I'm trans, right? I'm not actually, I might be born a girl, but I'm actually a boy. So it seems like it is a phase, but normally in years past, in decades past, generations past, adults would just say, it's a phase. We're going to get through it. Like, okay, yeah, right. Like, when I was a kid, my phase was, I'm spelling my name differently, and I'm going to get 3 ear piercings, and I want to color my hair pink, But now it's something completely different. And so you're saying
exactly
this time with this, is it that adults are just now buying into the phase and letting and actually then saying, oh, okay, rather than just treating it.
So I feel like what my generation did, and this was a funny point that she brought up, because I feel like.
Do you consider yourself a Zoomer or a millennial?
I don't know. I was born in '96, so
I don't know how it works.
Like millennial.
I think you're like right up.
Maybe I'm gonna
right
I'm gonna drag myself into the millennial category.
Associate better with.
But I was born. I did grow up in middle school and high school in the era of, like, remember, like, that early 2000s, like, scene, like hardcore kind of, like, kind of wave, or it was like scene kids, like the typical scene.
Yeah,
kid,
that's an old like that. I saw another thing people making comparison.
Like-
This used to be
like
the thing
everyone-
that goth kids like. There used to be goth kids. There used to be emo kids.
Exactly. Like everyone,
Now it's-
everyone I joked with, everyone I joke with is like we always talk about how we used to be scene kids and how we used to identify as like these
I was just
these
a
like
stoner.
goth like deathcore
Just a
like
stoner.
edgy kids with like long hair listening to like hardcore music at like 12 years old, you know. So
phase, you're saying, well, then we must do something about this. Is it the adults are doing that? Or are we really seeing a rise in mental illness in youth that is like genuinely different than previous years?
There's actually another point that she's getting.
she's being so like honest. Like she's giving so much credence to
You can tell, like she.
idea.
I don't know if I
for being like a quote unquote transphobe.
I don't think.
You know
I don't
what
know
I
if
mean?
you can put like if it's going to come up on the stuff that I want to review, but you can tell she talks about like Alex Rubin at one point. Like she watches right wing commentary. That's why I think she's mostly a libertarian. But like, yeah, she's being really fair here. What we asking? The one thing I just wanted to add was like, so she is missing like a whole other rabbit hole just before we go into it. Like this goes back to what I was saying earlier when we were talking about like fucking chemtrails and stuff. Is that like the forever chemicals and the astrazine, the stuff that RFK Jr. is talking about? Like I did a show about that stuff because I was like, this is too fucking crazy. And I heard like fucking T-Lab talking about it. Like I talked about that show on Bread and Circuses for like 2 hours. Like, so she's completely not even like taking into consideration that there's stuff in our environment that is altering our hormones in ways that we can't even measure, you know, on a daily basis, from when we're born, when we're in the room, to like walking around until the day we die. So
Yeah.
she's not even considering that. So we can keep playing it.
Maybe we've got a lot of chemicals in our food and genetically modified things, and maybe it's all the cell phones, or maybe it's social media. Is there a rise, an actual legitimate rise in mental illness that is causing this, or is this just a phase that adults are running with when they should?
Well, Kim, see what I want you to understand is that it's the gender affirming narrative that is saying to these kids that you may be trans, and if you have, they are jumping in at the first possible moment and saying, if you feel X, Y, and Z, you may be trans, change your name, change your pronouns, see how it feels, go to a gender therapist, wear a binder, tuck your penis in your testicles, and see how that feels for you. Now, I want you to know, Kim, when kids start identifying as the opposite sex, they get their social status is catapulted. They become the heroes in their group. They become celebrated by their teachers and other people at their schools on social media. They immediately get a boost of self-confidence, which is exactly what they lacked. So this is really important for parents to understand. And this is also part of why it becomes a social contagion. Because if you're in a group of girls, of 5 girls,
social contagion,
one of them, and then the other one of them, and then a third one is now identifying as a boy, and your daughter is seeing how they suddenly are much more popular, and they're now like fitting.
Puts it together.
What's that? No, so like, okay, well, what's in? What was I gonna say? Just that, like one of the other things she says, you got to think this woman is a therapist who's been doing her fucking craft for, you know, probably 30 years or so. Okay, she's a therapist. She probably sees freaking like hundreds of kids, you know, if not thousands of kids throughout her fucking lifetime. Like, I would take that into consideration. So, like, one of the things she talks about is how she'll see like 3 or 4 girls come into the same doctor's office at the same time looking to pick up drugs to do sex changes. Okay, so to say that there's not like a social contagion element, or just pretending that's not like a factor, or saying that's a conspiracy theory, is nonsense. Like she's seeing, I think probably with her own 2 eyes, something that's pretty fucking crazy about that. So, and she's also talking, which is something that I didn't really pay attention to because I don't really I I don't really I didn't think about this because I haven't been a teenager in freaking decades, is that like the reason why there's an increase in girls is because they're fucking cliquey in high school and they see that their friends are getting freaking cool and getting like freaking credence on it and getting props for transitioning, that they want to do it, and then everybody in the clique wants to do it. It's actually like a really freaking kind of
It is like part of it is
disgusting,
a trend kind of thing.
metastasizing.
It is embedded in our culture after all. I mean, you see it on Sesame Street and all the favorite television shows. Like it's already been normalized. So
The other thing that I guess for the sake of time is that I'll touch on is that like she also does kind of talk about a little bit, although she doesn't elaborate on indoctrination. And there actually are organizations that are trying to indoctrinate youth and are, giving material to schools and freaking getting funded by major corporations and deliberately trying to create curriculums that consist of gender ideology anywhere from kindergarten through 12th grade. I'll be talking about more of this stuff on Thursday. So I just like, for the sake of time, she does talk about indoctrination. Like it is like whether you want to say that that's a conspiracy or social contagion isn't real, stuff like that. If you're one of those jokesters, like the shit exists, and I'm going to be talking about it in a few days. Like there's actual.
Well, she mentions here about who exactly is pushing this.
Becomes a social contagion. Because if you're in a group of girls, of 5 girls, and
that you just stated, I mean, that makes so much sense why a teen would say, wow, well, my life is going to be so much better when I say that I'm trans. I continue to become popular and I'm going to feel really good about myself. Is it the culture that's driving this? Or is there a sinister group of, I've heard this, that the medical community has just a bunch of money to make off of these children. And so they're the ones really pushing it because of this. So is it the medical community pushing this with therapists, child therapists, and then doctors, and there's so much money to be made in this? Or is it the culture that's driving it?
I think that they're all factors. So I'll just remind parents that if you put your child on puberty blockers, which are almost always followed by opposite sex hormones, your child is a medical patient for life.
What if they choose later to stop? They grow out of this and they say, oh my gosh. And yeah, they did do these puberty blockers. Is there a point where they can reverse this?
Well, sometimes you can, it depends how early you got into it. If you go on the blockers and the cross-sex hormones at a very early time and your genitalia do not develop, let's say a boy never experiences the normal surge of testosterone that his body is waiting for to go through normal puberty, he will never develop normal.
Oh, this is the argument against puberty blockers.
He will never have mature sperm. He will be, his sexual response will not be normal. You need to go through puberty to have all those things happen.
It's neutering kids, is what it is.
Yeah, it's sterilizing children. So you could like, it's. I think you're.
It's a mass sterilization
I think it's within like the definition of the word to call transing kids a eugenics program.
Yeah, it is transhuman. It is. There is
like
part of that.
You're like
Like
if you're got like a
it's not a wild thing to say either. Like for whatever pushback you get for saying that, it's not that wild when things like you were talking about, like the G-Slang score and the fearability, whatever the fucking credit
it's just like
what's that score that they need?
The CI score.
The CI, yeah.
I just see it. I see it very easily making the connection between like the kind of Malthusian. Well, like if you sterilize them, then it's just like it fits all nicely with the depopulation agenda. Like if you like wrap your head around that, you kind of like are like me and kind of accept that Bill Gates isn't kidding when he says he wants to like kill people, and that like Planned Parenthood was like a way to it was part of the depopulation agenda. And like if you kind of like believe that the Malthusian mindset in the ruling class is kind of pervasive, then the idea that they're trying to increase like the like transing in children from a Malthusian point of view is like, I don't think too unreasonable. And that's why I think like you could call it a eugenics program if you want to make that argument. I think like anything that's like deliberately, like knowingly, like sterilizing youth, like is just sterilizing anybody without like. That's why I think it's one of the reasons I think people don't have. There's no way they're getting informed consent. One of the biggest complaints people have is not being able is like losing their fertility. So
Other conditions. Like
This is the case here for puberty blockers in the Dutch case, which is a really important case to highlight.
For prostate cancer, for endometriosis, for precocious puberty. These are medical research. Go to the gender clinic. This experiment, which is called the Dutch protocol, which was the very first time of giving blockers to kids with gender dysphoria, they very carefully picked those kids that would be part of the study. And they only included kids who, A, had early onset, the Jazz Jennings type of gender dysphoria, not gender dysphoria that develops in adolescence. It had to have developed in early childhood, that's A. And B, the kids had to be stable from a mental health point of view. They could not have serious problems with anxiety or suicidality or autism. Those kids were excluded from the study. Now, what we have done here, what the gender affirming narrative, those proponents have done, is they have taken that Dutch protocol and they are applying it to everybody. The most suicidal kids, the most autistic kids, okay? The kids who just developed their gender dysphoria a month ago. Those kids would never have been included in that Dutch study. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
I read something along the lines of there was like a story like someone like tried to get someone managed to get a trans like a approval for like a sex change within like 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
All they had to do was go to a therapist and say they were gender dysphoric, and then like it was like one more session later, and they already got it.
One of the things I saw on TLAV is that like there's people who will go in for a consultation, and like the only way that because insurance covers freaking transing now, okay, they cover that shit. But they'll only cover it if you have the medical condition gender dysphoria. So even if you're just like an autogynephiliac, a guy who just wants a pair of tits on his chest to fucking masturbate to, like they'll freaking call you gender dysphoric.
I think that's another segment that people don't talk about enough, that there is also like, creepy dudes who are also
this is okay, and I was actually telling Snow Himbo about this.
There's like a trans cell like segment.
Dude, the whole reason they don't have like women voices on shows speaking out against trans is because the best arguments are coming from women and feminists. Okay, because at the end of the day, like the reason why we have segregated bathrooms in the first place is because you don't want the one creepy guy fucking around with a woman just trying to mind her own business. Like, this is just like patriarchy 101. Like, the reason like why we don't allow men who have fucking full beards walk into fucking ladies' rooms and just like have a problem with them pretending that like they're a woman so that they can freaking masturbate in a stall while they listen to women urinating is like why we have these rules in the first place. So like it's a very concerted effort that they don't have women voices speaking out against this subject, because like they have the best takes on this stuff. Actual feminists. You can see plenty of fucking rad feminists who like are trying to say that like men who identify as women is actually fighting the patriarchy and is actually like liberating feminism, but that's like not a good argument. I don't really want to get in there, but like anyway, as I was saying, like the women are being silenced. This movement is mainly about men trying to co-opt women and trying to erase women, trying to take over women's spaces. And so that's why like they're trying to silence women throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, let's get to like
anyway, the thing with the Dutch protocol to take away is that really quick is that like it's basically this standard that they decided to go on that's based upon subjects that didn't have pre-existing medical conditions, that didn't have any mental illness, that were already identified as trans since they were children. Okay, this is like, and they measured it for fucking decades. So they basically went into a study that was kind of created with a desired result in mind. So that's the good takeaway that they use for the Dutch protocol, that they use for everything now, why people need to go through and why the standard of care is just transing people, is based on a study that was created to give these kind of results.
Statistics can make you how to lie with statistics.
That's basically what she's saying. It's a really good interview, but I mean, do you want to just skip to the end where like she kind of breaks down?
Yeah, that's what I'm like. What
It's just basically like the reason why I was saying earlier, like watch the interview, because you can even see with these little clips, like it looks like she's just getting like more and more sad because like she's like, listen, like we want to be cool.
You can even see it in her face here, like she's just like, oh my god.
Like, but yeah, like let's just watch. Let's just watch the last clip.
Yeah. So I just want to say, like, I really admire the compassion and the
nuance.
Well, she is a therapist after all. But the way that she frames this argument is very touching to me, because like I like fundamentally there's like a lot of logic there. So like
you can tell that she's like talks to kids probably every fucking day.
Exactly. Like like when you actually experience this form of gender dysphoria, or let's say like you have a kid, like you have your kid who is experiencing something along these lines, like how do you deal with it? Like she answers that here.
Some other thing, but do parents have the option to say, no, I'm not going to go through all of this?
Okay, well, it's first of all, it's devastating. Parents need a lot of support, but they don't need to reinvent the wheel. And of course they have the option of saying, hold on just a minute, I am not going with this until I learn a hell of a lot more about it. And then what parents...
That's the problem. Parents are not asking their kids questions.
Well,
they're just saying, "Oh, okay. Oh, then you must be this."
So
they're just making assumptions about their kids without further.
This is part of
explanation.
This is part of the propaganda program. Is that if you're in an environment, say like California, which we already talked about, is like on the chopping block for taking away parents' rights. Like, and you're in an environment where you're surrounded like around like-minded people who all feel this way already, it's really not that shocking to me that some liberal-brained mom would go into a doctor's office and not ask the right questions just because they were like, oh, my friends talk about this stuff all the time. Oh, like,
you know, take them to a doctor and just take whatever the doctor.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, doctors are good. Like, sure. Doesn't matter. I want to be there for my kid in the best way possible. There's no profit motive. So it doesn't take much for me to think that
it's like the same thing with the kids jabbing with parents jabbing their kids.
Yeah.
No questions asked. Just
adults not being adults.
Do what I'm told.
Need to do is the same thing they would do with any condition. You jump on the internet and you do your research.
Do your own research.
And you get connected to groups of parents that have already gone through this, and you get connected to support groups. And
you're not allowed to do your research.
Do your own research.
There's only one
this
approved
woman
science.
who's been doing her job got her degree over 40 years ago is saying, do your own research. Okay. She was in front of Congress a few weeks ago. She's saying, do your own research.
That are going to give you accurate information and not just the prevailing narrative. And I have all that information in my book, including I have 50 pages of appendices in my books. I didn't plan to have that many, but it ended up that way, which gives parents, first of all, I have a model.
But she talks about her book there. You can check it out on her website.
A fully healthy person lives in reality, even if it's a painful one. So there's so much that parents can do, so much for them to learn. Much more than even 1 year ago, and certainly more than 2 years ago. Parents have gotten organized. There are, like I said, there's resources. Go to my website, go to the parent resource list. I have a whole long list there of excellent places they can go for more information. Read my book. be prepared. Go to your school and let them know that you do not want your child exposed to indoctrinating information, because that is what it is. It's indoctrination. Indoctrination is when you present your child with ideas as if they are facts, and that's what's being done. Gender identity is an idea. It's a belief. It's not a fact. And when children are presented with this by authorities who they trust, and they're not given a chance to ask questions, and it's being told to them over and over again, and they're being told that if you ask questions and you don't believe in this system, you're a bad person. Well, that's called indoctrination.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's Gleason. That's Gleason on Thursday. There's another company that's like an intersex company that is also like trying to do that shit as well. But like there's actual organizations behind it as well. And like when you have even adults, it's like the same thing with the pandemic. Even when you have adults who surround themselves with
it's
like-minded
systematic.
individuals.
That's ultimately what she's pointing out here. When people say indoctrination, that means it's a
cultural
systematic
thing. It's like
educational, cultural, inclusion of your children, whether they consent or not. But here's
studies that show that in the long term, that failing to affirm your child is going to drive that child to suicide.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That is a myth.
There's no evidence of that.
I want parents to understand that is a myth. And if someone has told you that, a clinician has told you that, or a teacher, that is psychological and emotional blackmail. Your arm is being twisted so that you believe you have no choice, but you have to do this. And that is not the case.
So that's another thing, is that like,
and I'm gonna send you studies afterwards. So like I've actually seen studies that gender affirming care, quote unquote, actually increases gender dysphoria and increases the rate of suicide.
One of the things with endocrine disruptors like puberty blockers is it's fucking up your hormones. So when you're like,
that's affecting your brain
14,
and everything that's
you're
going
14,
on in your body.
15, you're supposed to be going through puberty and you're not going through puberty. Like that's fucking up with that can create dysphoria, because if you're supposed to go through your puberty and you're not going through your puberty, it's going to fuck with your head.
You're spending your entire life fighting and trying to fit this model of like what society wants to like represent you as. Instead of you just deciding to do your own thing with what you're given.
Well, that's the thing with the whole.
Isn't that like the point? Like we're
it's the whole,
supposed to like.
It's the whole social. The social contagion is hitting. What she argues, like girls, school-age girls, the worst. Okay, that she's seeing them come in multiple ones at the same time, asking for drugs. But that we can see that, like the pandemic, it's impacting parents as well, and they're just trying to do the right thing. And that's why I say, like, we got to think about what's like the compassionate thing that we always like try and be cool about, and that'll be the next thing to be psyoped, because they can see that they can create it into a wedge issue where, like, oh, if you're against like somebody like wanting to trans, if you don't agree with all the freaking narrative, then you're a fucking TERF, then you're fucking canceled. So it's just it's part of that, I guess.
When it comes to people, does that go hand in hand? If you're trans, the wrong body, and you have the wrong parts, you're going to have depression and you're going to want to commit suicide. Because that's what it sounds like people are being taught, right? They're saying if your kid is trans.
Well, let's go to 58 actually.
Do you want to go last? Which one are you going to?
58. Is there a push to criminalize
people out of it? What I'm doing, masculinity.
I mean, you can
go forward. And
you can go to 103. You can go look.
Okay, after this.
They just consider it a phase in which they were confused.
So kids are coming to you, and you're working on moving them past this feeling, these thoughts. That is there a legal push or a cultural push towards making that process illegal, similar to like gay conversion therapy, where it's like you're not allowed to try to talk a kid out of gender dysphoria.
We're already seeing this with things like the Mississippi like trans sanctuary state.
Well, isn't California the one where I'm pretty sure California is I don't know if it's a law yet, but I saw a thing where like they were trying to make it.
So there is so
the kid will get taken away.
It is either Minnesota or Mississippi where any child can go there, any United States citizen that's under 18 can go
Oh
there,
yeah, that's right.
get gender change, get a sex change, and their parents cannot consent whatsoever in any way, shape, or form because it's considered a sanctuary state for gender affirming.
Dude, it
whatever
doesn't.
that means.
It doesn't. Just like my mind cannot wrap around like good intentions behind somebody who can't vote, can't buy cigarettes, can't drink, can't join the military, but they can try. They can like be sterilized and they can have their freaking gender be mutilated. Like what? That doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. That speaks of just vested interests. Nobody with a good conscience would ever think that that's a good idea.
Absolutely not. But is there a push to criminalize?
Okay, well, let me just explain something. What I'm doing is not talking people out of it. What I'm doing is what I would do in any kind of therapy, which is to get to know my patient slowly, ask a lot of questions, be really curious about who they are, what their life is, what's going on in their family, what's going on with friends, at school. I get to know them as a whole person. Gender is one small part of that. And I will go often for many months with my patients, not even mentioning their gender dysphoria. And as other things start to get better, and we take care of their depression and their anxiety and their family issues, the gender dysphoria often improves significantly. And they'll just come to me and say, I don't really think about that anymore. I don't really care about my pronouns anymore. So I want that.
I mean, she could be pushing an agenda, but like I'm inclined to believe her.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I mean, like going back what we were saying earlier. It's a mental condition. She's trying to attach she's addressing it as a mental condition. She's not trying to medicalize people, and she's seeing results.
I'm not going to do it. You're a man. You're a boy. I'm not going to call you he, her, she, her. What is the right way for the rest of us to be reacting to this? I understand the cultural shock, and many of us don't want to go along with that. But how should we actually be behaving towards others that are saying they have this condition or their children have this condition?
Well, again, human relationships are complicated, and you're bringing up something that's a very sensitive issue because parents are already going through a hard time. They do not want to be. They don't want to hear from other people what their opinions might be. I would say, unless you are specifically asked by somebody for your opinion, I would say zip it. I mean, unless this is a loved one, it's a niece, a nephew, you might feel like you really have to say something. But, if it's a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, I would be really careful there in terms of whether you should say anything at all.
Okay.
Yikes.
And what about the pronouns? Should we be going along with their chosen pronouns, or should we be saying, no, you're biologically male, and so I'm not going to refer to you in this way? Is it psychologically, I want to be compassionate towards people.
Like, look, you can see her getting really freaking
to aid and abet in something that may be harmful, but at the same time.
Who the doctor?
You can tell it's getting personal for Kim at this point. Like, she was asking questions like, what can I do as like a good human being to be like compassionate to my like friend whose child is probably transitioning. That's what I think is happening.
I feel like she was pushing that out of her a little bit. She was like trying to see like how can we be more,
She's like, I want to be a good friend, and then she's like, even, and then what I think is happening to Kim is I think she probably has a friend who has like a daughter.
We all do.
Or a son who is transitioning, and Kim, like, for whatever reason, I think her ideology is like she doesn't want to recognize the identity of this child, and she's basically asking like, what do I tell the parents, and unfortunately, Miriam the doctor is like, yeah, basically like stay out of it, like, because it's such a touchy subject, it's such a charged up subject that the people who are doing this to their children are going to be fucking crazy. It's just really I think it's getting really personal for her anyway, though.
speech compelled. You don't want to be speaking in a way that you don't believe in to make another person happy. It gets very complicated. I would say this, that, when we're having these kind of difficult conversations with people we care about, our tone is sometimes much more important than what we actually say. So people should be very, what's the word? Mindful. People should be very mindful about the tone that they're using, and make sure that it's a tone that is still supportive and respectful. And if you're going to be disagreeing and you're going to be saying, I love you and our friendship and our relationship is very important, you're asking me to do something that I am not willing to do. Try and do it with that tone in which the caring part is stronger than the critical part of it.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Dr. Miriam
I
Grossman.
mean, like, yeah, she's like good at her job. Do you want to play the rest of it?
No,
Or,
did she break it down more?
was that already 106? 106.45.
We're at it now.
I get a little choked up about it because I do feel so bad for these people. And these parents that are going through this, and just what a crappy situation.
Oh, I didn't see this part. I didn't know. Kim.
Oh, you didn't actually? No, she like literally breaks down. You can tell.
I did not see this. I did not know about this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's like
stronger than the
because I do feel.
You can tell Kim really cared. Oh wow.
It's a personal issue for her. It's
this is. I did not know.
I didn't know you didn't see that part. I literally wrote Kim breaks down. Like, I'm not kidding.
I get a little choked up about it because I do feel so bad for these people. And these parents that are going through this, and just what a crappy situation, and crappy for society to just treat people so poorly, but also to push people to do things that are just going to be so devastating to their futures, to who they are, to their bodies. The whole thing is just a crappy situation, all in all. I mean, it's just terrible.
Kim, your emotional
Wow.
response is 100% correct. That is the response that any decent person is going to have, because we don't want any harm to come to our children. We don't want harm to come to other people's children. And so I'm going to tell you, good for you for feeling so strongly about this, and for those emotions to come up. And I have cried over this, and I have cried with patients, and I have cried with their parents. But, and that is part of why, and I cried writing the book. So again, it's lost in translation. I really
That's probably a good place, I
help
guess.
a lot of parents.
I just wanted us to do that. Like, it's definitely.
It's really a pleasure.
Thank you, Kim.
It's definitely, you definitely see that it's like impacting.
That if there's anything to take away from that, that is a very powerful interview. At least in terms of like the conversation.
I know it was a little long, but like that
call
woman.
him a transphobe. I really encourage them to at least watch that, because
Well, like, you can tell that
to
she's,
have
like,
that kind of response. I mean, go ahead.
She's speaking from a place of compassion. She's trying to like put herself in the other person's shoes. You can tell that she's been doing it for decades, and she's trying to be really delicate about it. No one's like trying to like
people feel
name
like
call it.
this. I feel like that's not an abnormal reaction. I feel like that's ultimately what people are trying to get across, but we're hitting a wall because there's.
I mean,
people
the
that
thing
have
is,
earplugs in that are just.
I wish if we weren't seeing the 5,000% increase, and we weren't seeing the 20% of kids identifying as LGBT now, like I wouldn't be talking about it. But unfortunately,
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly the
people,
problem. Yeah, it's the predatory nature of the industry.
yeah, like, unfortunately, like, she talks about indoctrination a lot. Like, that's like a real motherfucker. So I think it's a good excuse for me to talk about Gleason. I have like pages on that stuff. So I'll definitely be talking more about that stuff, I guess, on Thursday. But I think we went a little long, unless you got some other words to put in. But I do recommend watching that interview anyway. Parts I didn't watch, like, the woman clearly knows what she's talking about, I think. And like, you can tell I've already showed Cam a few times. I think she has like a pretty like, I would say, libertarian, independent opinion of things.
I don't know. She can have her commie sides too. Well, I'm not really. It's hard to pin a political ideology on Kim. She is a wild card.
She does but she also does the stuff on like the aliens, and she fucking goes down the conspiracy
Yeah.
stuff. So like,
Yeah. Well, no, she said the thing about the moon landing the other day.
yeah, she said the thing about the moon landing the other day. I was like, that's
no,
fucking
she
awesome.
went all out. She's just like, I just don't buy it. I don't buy the moon landing. She's like, you know what, Kim? I'm with you. I don't buy it either. Fuck it. Call me a moon landing denier. I don't buy it either. I don't buy it. Call me a conspiracy nut.
Well, what I brought
ahead.
up, what I posted was that Japan tried to land a fucking autonomous one without anybody in it on the moon, and fucked up royally like what, a month ago, and couldn't do it. So like, they could do it in 69, but they can't do it in 2023. Okay, that makes sense. I don't know. Like, I've seen pictures. I don't know what to believe with the pictures anymore, but it just doesn't feel like it happened to me anymore. That was like 2023 was the year that I stopped believing in the moon landing.
Well, to close out the show tonight, we do have breaking news. Nina Turner.
Oh God!
It turns out I
running for
was
president?
hosting on Boss, but we covered topics that were important to us as we bargained the 2024 election. I wanted to spend more time on the ground so that I can be more impactful as possible as a daily live show. We are still sunsetting on Boss as a daily live show, guest hosting, blah, blah, blah. So she's basically quitting. She's quitting TYT. If this is in backlash of the Anna experience, I don't know if this is because of Anna, the whole Anna stuff. But this is.
I mean, it could just be Nina trying to be relevant again.
I don't know. She doesn't really have a path after this. The reason why she went to TYT is because she couldn't win an election. So
yeah, that's true.
She went to media. That's what they do. Is
you
like,
think she had irreconcilable differences with TYT?
Her husband's
I would
a
think
cop. Yes, her husband's a cop. So
I would have thought that.
Isn't that
TYT
great?
was more
Great for
her-
TYT. Isn't it amazing? Like I'm just like. I'm kind of like, it's kind of weird to see myself in this place. Like, I used to watch TYT like back in like pre 2020, and like now they're like completely falling apart. And then I started a show here on any news network.
She probably quit. That doesn't surprise me. Saw that thing with the Mr. Beast stuff.
She's gone. She's dead. This is the TYT Titanic submersible going down in flames as we speak, ladies and gentlemen.
I wonder what network she'll be crawling to next.
The young
she'll be guest hosting on fucking what's the show?
She'll be on MSNBC.
On Rising.
She'll be on
Rising.
She'll be on The Hill or MSNBC at any time. Just give it time. Just give it time.
MSNBC, you don't think she's burned her bridge too much to be on MSNBC?
Huh?
Yeah. This is kind of what I think. I think she'll start making the rounds on like little bigger indie channels. I know you jest, but like,
will she go on RBN?
If she's running out of options,
ask.
If she runs out of options,
she knows she's gonna get grilled by Nick.
Well, like, has she been on Brianna Joy Gray or Katie Halper? Probably. So like, if she's familiar,
I can't think of recently.
Anyway, I could see that. I could see that happening.
Yeah,
she'll be on OnlyFans in a month. that's really what
that's where we're going. That's where we're going, folks. Anna's gonna start an OnlyFans pretty soon. Does it let me have one? She pretty much has one.
Well, like speaking of OnlyFans, I think the the Pussy Riot person, the person from Pussy
she
Riot,
started an OnlyFans too. Yeah,
I think that's an MK Ultra thing.
No, for sure it is.
I don't think she started that because she woke up.
How did that band did not get popular over?
Well, she like there's no way. It's all blurry now. There's no way that there's no way that she authentically was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be a freaking OnlyFans model on behalf of the United States government." Like, there's no, I don't believe that for 1 second. Like, yup, your brain has been scrubbed to fucking hell for whatever reason. After I laughed,
Completely brainwashed. Completely, utterly brainwashed. Glowy fans. Glowy fans. All right. Well, I hope you all had a good night, folks. This was a long stream. A
was a
long
long
ass
one.
fucking stream.
Thanks for
There was a
sticking around,
long one
everybody.
last night too. I'm pretty sure with the how did we miss that? I did not catch it. I did not catch it, but one of the older Diana members joined. So Tata Amy joined. So go you check that out. And there's also Stu's Talica tomorrow with Jesse Jett, the one that I was supposed to, the one that I fake replaced 2 weeks ago.
That's a thing now.
He's doing the real one now. This is the real Stu's
The
Talica.
real ones now. The real ones
Yeah,
now.
the real
Okay.
ones now. That's tomorrow. And you got your regular shows lined up for the week. Make sure to subscribe. We're on Twitter as at Get Indie News. You can follow me. I'm Greg, Big Mac Crab on Twitter, and Chris over here, 420 Pardon Circuses. You're gonna be on live on
I'm
Thursday
on
as well.
Thursday, same time.
Yeah,
And yeah. I think I've talked about enough. I'll be talking a little bit more about the propaganda machine. Not blowing smoke up people's asses, but
yep. So check out the schedule on Twitter. Be kind, stay independent, and
don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Thank you, everybody.
Do all the things do all the shares and do everything that you need to do to share independent media because it's important. Stay independent.